Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the May 31st, 2017 ZBA meeting. Could you read the preamble, Rich?
You want to do the pledge first?
We can do the pledge first. All right. Everybody rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Rich.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will proceed with the petitions in the order they are listed on the agenda unless the board deems it appropriate to take a petition out of order. State law and local ordinances set out criteria that must be met in order for this board to grant a request. The minimum requirements are outlined on the form provided by the Community Development Office, and the petitioner should proceed with this format to provide adequate justification for the board to grant the request. The chair will then open the meeting to hear testimony either for or against the request. All discussion will be between the speaker and the board. Please be respectful of all, and in the interest of time, refrain from repeating previous testimony. No new documentation will be accepted by the board for consideration this evening, but the board reserves the right to ask for additional testimony at any time. After hearing the facts from all parties regarding a petition, the chairman will close the public hearing and the board will deliberate and vote on the request before moving on to the next petition. Please turn off all cell phones and pagers.
Okay, all right, if you plan on speaking this evening, testifying for or against a petition, or if you're speaking on behalf of a petition, please stand and raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, have a seat. A couple of housekeeping items. And I keep tapping my mic because it doesn't sound like it's on. So when you come up to the stand to sit down, there's a clipboard. You will need to sign in. And make sure that you'll see that there is a green light, and it should be bright. That way we know your mic's on. We need you to speak into your mic, okay? All questions and conversation is, as said, directed towards the board. The next ZBA meeting will be on June 28th, 2017. And with that, we will hear our first. Oh, and one last thing, Lenny, you're going to be sitting in for Fran, who is not here this evening. I also want to take a brief moment to extend and just give you a little leeway on this, but to extend the condolences from the zoning board to Stanley Bonaslawski, who served on the zoning board and the planning board, as well as the budget committee for the town of Merrimack. He's a loyal friend to the town of Merrimack and the community development office, and his passing it will be felt with my colleagues and with the folks here in the town. I know some of the people on the board here knew him. I did not know Stanley personally, but I know that Tony did. Did you have any comments that you wanted to make on behalf of Stanley?
Yes, I knew Stan for a while. I served with him on the planning board and on the ZBA. He was a man who was straightforward, honest, and really loved the town of Merrimack, and he'll be missed. Thank you.
Our condolences go out to the family. So, our first petition this evening is for Executive Park, LLC, petitioner owner, special exception under section 2.02.3C1 of the zoning ordinance to permit a residential use within the C2 district. The parcels are located at 4 and 6 Executive Park Drive in the C2 General Commercial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 4D, lots 076 and 077, case number 2017-12.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members. Attorney Greg Michael on behalf of the applicant before the board this evening. Both petitions, both the special exception and the variance, kind of run together. And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I may take you through both. You can certainly vote on them separately, but I think they kind of flow together to a certain extent. and I don't want to repeat myself unnecessarily.
No, I fully understand, although we will be taking them as separate matters for
I have
voting
no
purposes.
problem with that,
Okay.
but I think the presentation lends itself to both for consistency and a logical approach to what we're doing this evening.
Okay.
With your permission, thank you. What we're looking at is the former Hilton Hotel site, a site that I'm somewhat familiar with, having been involved with it for a number of years on a number of occasions. In fact, I was involved with the court case that allowed this to go to the town for rezoning 40 years ago. And what we're looking at is just a tad different than what we brought to the planning board. I'm going to mention to you that we met with them on December 20th to review this, and basically they didn't take a vote. It was for a planning meeting, a discussion, if you will, and they were quite supportive of the possibility of moving forward with this plan. The idea here is we've got a 5-acre parcel, approximately 16-acre parcel of land left, which was part of the old Executive Park Drive development, which was approximately 43 acres in size back when it was originally developed. And you know the theaters at the end, there are certain office buildings. Here you got the D'Angelo's parcel up near the front. Again, this was a vacant piece of land in 1977, and development kind of commenced after that time. What we're proposing is 280 garden-style units located on the land. We're going to retain the buffers. We're going on the 16-acre piece. We're going to be on the east side of what the brook area that you see here. We're also going to maintain more than sufficient buffering along the what's called Lot 6 Executive Park Drive. I'm showing you that here, the 5-acre parcel. When we were before the planning board, it was unclear whether we would have the 5-acre parcel. We do have that now, so we felt it best to present the entire concept to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for review. The issues tonight are first a special exception. Residential use is allowed essentially in the C2 zone, but by special exception. So it's not a classic variance situation. The two variances are rather interesting. The first is density, because the minute you move west of the turnpike, you really don't have the ability to create multifamily residential, only east of the turnpike. I'll talk a bit more about that. The other variance relates to, well, I've got my density units, but also parking the stuff west of the turnpike. So you've got density and putting it west of the turnpike. It's kind of an interesting thing. And if you get back into Merrimack zoning many, many years ago, before the development of Continental Boulevard, what you find if you went down the highway and came east, that's where Route 3 was. That's where what little commercial development we had many, many years ago was in Merrimack. The minute you moved west of the turnpike, it was pretty much exclusively single-family residential open land in that area. That's what it was. So when the zoning came in, it was easy to use those kind of historic landmarks, since the highway was built in about 53, as delineating factors. Then we have Continental Boulevard coming in, which kind of changed the complexion of west of the turnpike. And that's kind of important, because this particular piece, as the board is well aware, occupies the intersection, which used to be where the toll gate was, which was moved north to Bedford. But this particular piece of land occupies a fairly interesting place, if you will, in Merrimack history, as well as the utilization of it moving forward from that time. So the variances are kind of interesting, which is density of multifamily and allowing multifamily west of the turnpike. If you move up and down the road, historically, we've got Harris Pond, we've got Eastridge, we've got a number of higher density developments, and all of those happen to be east of the turnpike. But I would point out right now that the master plan completed in 2013, 2014, just a few years ago, clearly identified and clearly stated that areas that were near in proximity or adjacent to the turnpike were logical places, and I've got some quotes for you, for, further multifamily kind of development, especially when it was near other commercial projects that would provide kind of a, how do I put it politely, an area where you can actually walk to go to the market, walk to go to some of the restaurants, walk to go to the theater, and these are desirable goals in looking at the master plan. So the idea here is to bring in residential. And quite frankly, if we look at this in a broader sense, if we had brought this to you, let's say 15 years ago, what do you think we would have brought to the board? PRD. That's what we would have brought to the board, because we would have had a planned unit development. We had sufficient acreage. We would have brought in business. We would have brought in residential. We would have brought in things that, in effect, looked like and were something that the ordinance does allow at this time in certain areas of the town. I would point out that recently the hotel has been demolished. Wood Springs Suites is the only thing that's happened out there. And I would point out that my clients for 2 years have been trying to develop and find possible commercial developers for the site without any success whatsoever. And I would point out that this particular area is somewhat difficult. Merrimack has proven somewhat difficult in the past few years for commercial development, although we've had a bit of luck in that, in what we call the New Shaw's area. Think about it. Think about that area. That really isn't that new. It's a transplant. Shaw's moved from the South Shaw's site on DW Highway. The liquor store moved from that site into the new area. The jewelry store moved into the new area. You know, it's been a transplant into this intersection zone of Continental Boulevard, Greeley Street, if you will, and F.E. Everett Turnpike. So while it looks like we're doing something commercially, we really haven't done a whole lot, and we'd like to see more of it. And we think this project may help, number one, revitalize the area, the old South Shaw site, help revitalize and continue to expand what exists on Executive Park Drive. We have open office space there. The D'Angelo site is also not fully utilized. We believe that these things can be improved if we have additional residential in this area. I would point out that the master plan that I've been referencing to you states certain things that are very important as it relates to this particular site. It states we should refine the town's zoning and land use regulations to allow for greater flexibility. And that's exactly what we're talking about and looking at here tonight. It further states, quote, look for opportunities to creatively revitalize underutilized and vacant sites. And again, I've discussed with you the concerns that the town has had over various sites. My firm worked closely with the Zylas and Charlie Morgan to help revitalize the Zylas site. I think the board is well aware that the North Shaw site was never completely developed. The only piece of it developed was the Shaws. And there was a balance of that I got approved that was quite nice. But yet again, the desire for commercial development based upon the population and demographics in Merrimack has left that vacant for all these many years, well over 15 years at this point. We used to have a Newick's restaurant. That's gone. The Merrimack shopping center near the Commons has had difficulty, not all the time, but people come, people go. But again, there's been no rush for commercial development in Merrimack. And we think that it's important to take a look at these parcels that are available and work them into a plan that makes sense for the town. We propose, again, 280 garden-style residential units. We believe that, unlike the commercial, which would require some significant off-site improvements and probably not be done. I mean, we don't have a huge site here. And when we've taken a look at the traffic, I want to make that clear. We've taken a look at it, and our analysis shows a couple of things. First, we don't feel that the residential use is going to exacerbate the existing situation down there. In fact, Jason, our consultant, has indicated to me that with some minor light adjustments, we actually may be able to improve things in that area. I can assure you that with commercial, it's going to be a significant issue, and it may be difficult for anybody to reasonably and logically develop that site. Let's take a look at taxes briefly. I just want to touch on it. Right now, the parcel's probably, that was before the hotel was ripped down, is about 50 grand in taxes. We figure that with the infrastructure and development, we'll have over $400,000 in taxes that would be utilized by making good use of this particular site. I would point out that this, if we're a PRD or PUD, you can use whatever term you want, we'd be able to get a significant number of units in the neighborhood of 250 to 300 units, consistent with what we're proposing. But I'm not here to discuss those numbers because it depends on the bedrooms in the units and the mix of the units. So it would be inopportune for me to suggest that it's specifically this or specifically that. So I'm not going to do it. I want to point out a couple of other things just before we move ahead with the criteria that I'm going to get to in a moment. You know, the recent study of growth in New Hampshire, and I brought this forward to the planning board, it's very important to understand that, interestingly enough, with all of the problems over the past, well, it's been 6 to 10 years, close to that, we have almost full employment in New Hampshire. And it's working a bit to a disadvantage. And there are people in the industry, the BIA and others, who say, hey, we don't have enough reasonable housing to continue with reasonable and good development, including high tech in New Hampshire. And I think we all need to take a close look at that. And I think that's one of the reasons the legislature passed workforce housing legislation a few years ago. That's not what this is. That's not what this is designed for. That's not what we're proposing. We're looking at this as a flexible addition to the housing availability in the town. And it's housing that we believe will effectively use the existing services of the cinema, restaurants, medical facility that we just got that was approved for the site near the liquor store, and the various businesses that exist in that area today. We think this is important. Again, the master plan. If there is an inadequate affordable housing, it can adversely affect the area and businesses and public agencies by reducing the supply of workers required to fill a variety of needs. The master plan states that it's to promote and provide for mixed-use, higher-density development where appropriate. Provide for mixed-use, higher-density development where appropriate that will enable less use of automobiles. The master plan is significant in looking at the ability for people to walk and use bicycles, and the planning board is big on that. They like that idea. And, you know, they mandated sidewalks in front of the Woodspring Suites, mandated it. We weren't happy about spending that money, I will tell you that. But they said, no way, Jose, we want them. And we will propose and put in as part of our plan sidewalks, full sidewalks, to again facilitate the ability to almost walk the entire length of Executive Park Drive out toward, there's a crossing, I believe, out near Greeley, to, again, use the businesses and facilities that exist in that area. I've mentioned that this proposal, we believe, will coexist nicely with the development. The master plan, again quoting, promotes management of traffic operations on the roadway system by maintaining acceptable levels of service on the arterial and collector streets. This is an interesting thing. One of the problems with that site, if you can think about it, is what is that road? Dead end road. What do most commercial activities rely upon? Road traffic, like it or not. You don't put a McDonald's at the end of a dead end street. It's just, you don't do it. And I believe, and I've spoken to my clients, that one of the issues out there with that property for a commercial development that would make sense and be economically viable and not end up like our South Shaw's that's empty, and heck, that's on a main thoroughfare, DW Highway, is the location. So you've got a very unique situation in terms of how Executive Park Drive was developed and where it's located and what's near it. I'm not going to get into specific traffic numbers. I know that's really a planning board issue. Jason is here if we need him. But again, I've indicated to you that our studies clearly show that our use will work, it'll work well, and it's not going to be a significant impact. I want to move to the elements, if I can, Mr. Chairman and members. I'll start with a special exception. Is the specific site an appropriate location for such use or uses in terms of overall community development? Again, overall community development. I pointed out to you that the whole issue here is that there is residential is allowed in the C2 zone, if appropriate. I would suggest to the board that based upon the almost surrounding commercial, you've got commercial really on three of the four sides, plus we've got a significant buffer to the west where it abuts the start of residential land, and its location near the turnpike, that this is the classic example of what the master plan points out as an appropriate location for this type of development. I mentioned it's within walking distance to entertainment, office space, restaurants, medical services. The orientation creates kind of a shadow mixed-use neighborhood, which is how the PUD regulation, the PRD regulation, is written in Merrimack. The proximity of places to live, work, and eat without use of a vehicle is particularly, we believe, important, and the type of thing that people are looking for today in our current environment. Again, I've mentioned the inability to develop the property in accordance with the commercial zoning, which quite frankly is a bit antiquated as it relates to this particular parcel. We believe that the master plan identification of this property as an opportunity zone, as a place to kind of create a mixed-use development, makes this clearly an appropriate site. Does the board have any questions about that issue?
I do.
Go ahead.
So you talked about mixed use, and you've brought that up a couple times. My understanding from mixed use is that it, similar to what's being proposed and being projected to be put in by the outlets, where you have hotel, apartments, restaurants, and stores. Mm-hmm. You're not really proposing. Doesn't sound like mixed use. You're just proposing apartments.
It creates,
unless you're talking about the lower level of the apartments being restaurants and stores.
Well, I'm talking about in terms of the environment it is in. It's a form of mixed use. It's a shadow, and sometimes we call it a shadow mixed use. And by that I mean the mixed use abuts directly this area. If we were developing this from the start, then I'd show you D'Angelo's, I'd show you an office building, I'd show you a theater, mm-hmm. I'd show you those things in the area, and right across the Greeley Street, Continental Boulevard, if you will, we've got those particular areas. So I'm not suggesting that this in and of it, this project is mixed use. I'm suggesting that in the context of the area it's in is a form of mixed use. That's what I'm trying to point out, Mr. Chairman.
Nope, I understand. Did you have a question for Sorry. Okay.
The second criteria, the uses developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. With all due respect, we believe this will generate less traffic. We've got significant buffering. It's located on a dead-end street. Given the history of the property, I mean, back when it was the Hilton, it had 203 rooms, a convention center, restaurants. It was a very significant commercial style location, but it also had people living there nightly, so to speak. We believe that this will not adversely affect. We believe that this is consistent with further development in this area based upon the fact of its location, the size of the parcel, and the difficulty that will ensue to try and keep it a commercial use. We've been waiting for commercial there. I was involved in 2 or 3 different projects for that site. A Marriott water park project. Didn't work. Possible assisted living. Didn't work. Reason it didn't work was the cost to renovate the building to code. Better to rip it down and try and do it again. But the cost even to replace assisted living didn't work. There have been people from all over the country that have looked at this to try and develop some type of a more commercial facility. The other thing I want to point out when we talk about commercial, the other reason the zoning and the town prohibited the multifamily west of the Turnpike. Do you remember why that was? Does anybody know why that was? Because, it's interesting, because they felt that that type of use was more of a commercial use. In other words, renting apartments to people wasn't like owning a single-family house. It was more like a commercial business use. And that was one of the other reasons that they felt that that mix may have been inappropriate west of the Turnpike at that time. So again, I point out that this is a form of business, but it is a residential style business that we think fits the plan. We don't believe in any way, shape, or form this will adversely affect anybody. We'll have appropriate drainage, quite frankly, probably better drainage than what the Hilton had. We'll have sewer, water furnished by the municipality, as well as gas on site. So we don't believe that there's anything about it that would adversely affect the community. Do you have any questions about that?
So, I do.
Go ahead.
Not thinking about the traffic generated from this unit, just in general, there's a lot of backup that occurs from the exit 11 ramp for people heading southbound. So if there is even if there is no change in traffic, if there's a tweak to the light to allow traffic to move out of that plaza, that's going to further slow down traffic moving towards exit 11. And people driving down Turkey Hill Road who have to sit there and wait every morning. I've had to wait as long as 10 to 15 minutes just to take that left on Turkey Hill because of the traffic. So you make one tweak, just one tweak, to let traffic flow in from where this is proposed, and you're now making that longer, even if there's absolutely no cars coming through. So I'm having a hard time understanding how the suggestion of changing the traffic light is not going to impair the neighborhood when it's already going to be impossible to get on the highway. I mean, please enlighten me.
Well, I'll let Jason respond to that. I guess my point is do you think it would be better if we had a higher level traffic density commercial development? I mean,
so are you asking me would I want my house to abut a commercial property or an apartment? Is that what you're asking?
What I'm suggesting is this, that any type of development creates some traffic issue one way or the other. I think we can all agree to that. What our traffic study has shown is that the better development, I say better, the better in terms of, I'll use the term less impact, is this development versus the nature, a commercial development that would require significant traffic to survive. I for one, don't want another South Shaw's lining a highway road in Merrimack, or the North Shaw's that wasn't developed. I don't think that's good for the town. I don't think that sends a good signal to other commercial people that want to locate in Merrimack. Now, having said that, we could dance the traffic issue quite a bit, and I'm going to allow him to respond to you regarding residential versus commercial and hopefully a direct and a direct way. But I want to make it clear that what we're talking about here isn't necessarily no traffic. We believe that if you look at the entire environment, that this is a much better way to go. That's how I want to trigger that. Jason?
Actually, was that explanation satisfactory?
I think he's bringing someone on to
You wanna
further
talk a
answer.
little
Would you like to hear from my consultant, or?
Yes, please.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jason Floyd with Beta Group.
Is that on? Make sure you're talking. That's on. Put it up in your, put it up in
Okay.
your. That's it, thank you.
So what we
Could
did
you
was...
also please sign in?
Oh, sure.
We'll
Thank you.
sign them. We'll sign
They'll
them.
sign them.
Okay.
Thanks. So what we did was we took a look at, originally we looked at the parcel of land before this 5-acre was purchased. So we were able to get about 74,000 square feet of commercial space on here, plus a restaurant, to be able to see what that would generate for traffic, comparing that to the 280 proposed apartment units. And that does not, again, that does not include this section here. And what we found was that on a daily basis, the retail would generate about 4,700 additional trips, more than the apartment development.
I'm sorry. So I want to rephrase my question. I'm
Sure.
not sure I was specific enough.
Okay.
So assuming that nothing is there now, we don't put anything there, taking all of this aside, if there's a modification to the traffic system in that area, where there's currently a huge backup in peak periods, that modification to the light is going to be what? It's going to be allowing more traffic to exit that road, therefore less traffic to pass through. Where specifically is the traffic change going to occur? Because that is that I think would dramatically impact neighborhoods around. And actually, I mean, I'm on the opposite end of Merrimack, and I think it would impact me. So just throwing that aside, I'm just curious what the change is that's going to be made to the traffic lights to assist traffic to not impact people that live in that part of Merrimack.
So didn't want to get into the whole traffic signal philosophy and history of everything, but traffic signals have kind of grown, progressed over the years. Originally, you used to have pre-timed traffic signals where it didn't matter if a car was waiting there or not. There was a green light given to that approach or that movement. Over time, different things have happened. You have the cameras up on top, or you have the loops in the road. The loops measure how much metal is on the road, triggers it, sends a signal to the cabinet, and then, based on that, that's called actuated. And so the actuated signal gave you a minimum and a maximum amount of green time that would be able to be provided for the different movements or approaches. Now there's a brand new thing that the New Hampshire DOT is getting involved with. It's called adaptive signal. Adaptive signals, they send sensors and they measure if there's a car there or not. Remember how the actuated was the minimum and maximum? The adaptive doesn't even take that into consideration. It starts off with that, but then it adjusts. It continually adjusts. It's not set for a certain time of the day. It adjusts based on every minute so that it can process the cars more efficiently. And that's the new technology that's out there today. So if you have to put it into general terms, if you have a traffic signal downstream that's holding everybody up, if that is able to operate more efficiently, then the other signals can operate more efficiently, and you're not going to have as many backups. I'm not saying that everything's going to be at the best optimal levels out here. I'm not trying to say that at all. But what I am trying to say is that it certainly would be able to offset a lot of the delays in the queuing back through the signals that are out there.
So what you're saying is there's actually a proposed technology change for the lighting system as part of this?
That would be something that we would be working. See, there's 3 different entities that are involved out here with the roadway system. DOT represents 2 of those entities, one being the Bureau of Turnpikes, the other being Bureau of Traffic. Bureau of Traffic is in control of all the signals in this area, but the roadways themselves are under your jurisdiction. Kind of tricky, you know, the roadways, the town, the signals under Bureau of Traffic, and then you got the turnpike with the ramps and everything under Bureau of Turnpikes. So we would actually have to be working through the process with the planning board, DPW, community development from the local level, and then also with the DOT, Bureau of Traffic, and Bureau of Turnpikes. Turnpikes, even though there's really no signals on Executive Park Drive at their ramps, they want to know what the impacts are going to be. And if there's going to be any backups or anything like that that's going to affect them. So to tell you right now, is that what we're proposing? That's what we're planning on presenting and working with the state. The state is ultimately the ones that are going to make that decision because it's their signals, their intersections. So if we are able to work with the state and they're in agreement, we're going to do it as part of this development.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Without getting into too much of the traffic issues, which really kind of sit on the planning board's table, not ours, but I'm looking at this site with the amount of space that's there, and this site is going to be developed. There's no question. With everything that's coming along, it's going to be developed. And I think it behooves us to look at what the best development is that we could allow here that will minimize the impact on surrounding areas, as well as provide for the best opportunities for people who are living in town. I cringe to think of something like a PC Connection who could come in and buy this site and put in something similar to what they have on 101A with 3,000 to 4,000 employees who would be arriving between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning and leaving between 4:30 and 5:30 at night, when everybody else is trying to get out of here and get into town. The residents that are here now are already backed up at that intersection. I come through it all the time, so I know what's there, and I know the challenges, but I'm looking at something like having a PC Connection, anybody else who is a commercial development, bringing in that many employees that are going to be targeting the traffic at those peak times now. If we're looking at 280 units, there's studios, there's one bedrooms, there's two bedrooms proposed. Even if you say there's 2 cars per unit, that's like 500 cars. That's nothing compared to what we would have as a commercial development there. And so we're going to have issues at that intersection no matter what happens. And so I'd like to see what our options are for what we could allow here that might minimize the impact, and then at the planning stage, work on what we can do to work with the state as well, because the state is very involved in that intersection, and see what we can do to make that better. It's never going to be good. It's a busy intersection. There's a lot of people coming through, but you know, what can we do to minimize the impact?
Thank you. Number 3.
Is that a question or is that a
I
observation?
think that was a statement, observation.
Well,
So-
I
That's what I was gonna say.
kind of agree with the observation, but the one thing I can make clear, based upon Jason's numbers, is that any type of rational, economically viable commercial-styled activity in there very likely would produce significantly greater traffic numbers in this so-called bottleneck. That seems to me pretty clear when I reviewed the numbers in the study that they did. So
Number 3.
there'll be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. Again, we're proposing sufficient parking to satisfy the 280 units. We're going to have sidewalks, which will be integral to the project, as I've indicated to you. We're going to do our best to create a safe environment for pedestrians and bike traffic to use this area into the other commercial development that's there. The ingress and egress, of course, will be designed by our engineers to appropriately intersect with Executive Park Drive. And I want to bring up something now that's kind of important. Executive Park Drive, the plan by Public Works is to rebuild that drive. I don't know if the board is aware of that. And we're prepared to work with them. We've had several meetings with Public Works to discuss this issue. Work with them so that the sidewalks are in the right place, so that everything works out. The important thing I want to bring to the board is that if Executive Park Drive is built without some development in that area, whether it's us or someone else, there's a 5-year moratorium to cut into that road. 5 years. So we could be staring at another several years in the face, still hunting around for doing something logical, and I would point out consistent with the master plan with that site. So I want to make it clear that we believe that with our appropriate signage, with our work with the state, as Jason's pointed out, regarding signaling, and the fact that this is not a through road, which isn't particularly attractive for commercial, we believe that this is a good site for residential, and there will be no serious traffic hazards to vehicle or pedestrians, because again, you don't get that constant motion of traffic here. You don't get that because it's a dead-end street. It's not like living on Route 3. So we believe there will be no serious nuisances to vehicles or pedestrians based upon what I've just indicated to you. Thank you. Anything else on that?
Number 4.
Adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation of the proposed use or uses. What can I say? We're going to be complying with all of the codes. We're going to be complying with the sewer and water requirements. We're complying with parking. We're going to have natural gas. We're going to have sidewalks to be constructed to facilitate safe access. There's not much else when you talk residential in this context of residential that would be needed for the proper operation for our proposed use. Those are the criteria in the special exception. If you do want to take that up, Mr. Chairman, first, certainly, that's fine. I'm ready to go with the variance. I'll defer to the board as to how they wish to handle this.
I would say, let's say, I'd want to take them separately, given
It's fine.
the magnitude,
That-
for lack of a better way of putting it, to the plan.
That's fine, and again, I'd like to incorporate by reference my preliminary remarks for the zoning matter. I don't want to have to repeat all of that.
No,
to
I
get it into the
understand.
record for the zoning side of the file. I think, it's more of a technical point that I'm making, but as long as that's incorporated by reference in my zoning application thing, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions for? All right. I'm going to open up the public hearing. Just so everybody understands, because there's a large group of people here, and I'm sure that you all are very eager to say your piece, and by all means, I want to hear it. Just so you know, this first petition is focused on whether or not to allow residential use in a commercial district. Has nothing to do with density, size, it just whether or not you can actually put residential use in a commercial environment. And so just real quickly, 101 on this is that this is a commercial area. So like Lynn had suggested, something like Fidelity or PC Connection or some other company could come in there. They wouldn't need to come in front of zoning. They could build a facility to have 5,000 cars or 3,000 employees, 2,000, whatever. They could do that without coming to us because it's zoned for commercial. What's being proposed is a residential property. So the first petition that they're coming forward on is regarding whether or not they can actually put residential here. The second petition they have, which Attorney Michaels made reference to, is the density, and that is the density side of it. So I just want to make everybody aware before they come up and speak, and I will open up the public forum. Is there anybody that would like to speak for this petition? Okay. Is there anybody that'd like to speak against this petition? If so, please come on up, sign in, state your name, and talk to us.
Where do I sign?
There's a microphone. Just make sure the light's bright green, and just state your name for the record.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Elaine Batchelder. I live on Bigwood Drive. Hi, Tony. I would like to make an observation, if I may.
Please.
There have been several proposals to do things with the old Merrimack Hotel that were ill-advised. And I'm so glad that the two things didn't happen. One was that they wanted to make a 6-story water park for children when the fire department can only throw the hook 4 stories. I'm glad that didn't come through. The other one was that there was a developer who wanted to put up elderly housing, and he wanted the town of Merrimack to guarantee the $1 million HUD loan for private business that he would own. And that didn't work either, and I'm glad. So the same site now is the location of the Wood Springs Suites, which I think is wonderful. It meets the zoning, it meets the planning, it does everything. It's just what's supposed to be there. And I think it's a big enhancement. It's so much better than what had been there. And I also believe that we would be wise to make sure that whatever comes into this site fits the original plan and that it is commercial, and I don't think that having a number of apartments where you're going to have many children, you're going to have terrible traffic congestion, it's just, I feel it's a very bad idea, and it shouldn't even be considered, but that's how I feel as an abutter. But I do think that it was worth the wait to get the proper thing on the property with Wood Springs, and I hope that you can get the proper thing on this site. And I'm thinking in terms of medical buildings. Every other block is medical buildings. A couple of nice sites for maybe Dartmouth Hitchcock or one of the other hospitals, that would be better with much less traffic. And as a person who doesn't leave Big Wood Drive early in the morning or late in the afternoon, if I can possibly avoid it, I'd hate to see that added to. No. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to come down and speak against this petition? By yourself?
Good.
You just sign in and say your name, that'd be great.
We'll never respond to this, but
Oh,
we'll get there.
that's okay. Take your time.
Hi, my name is Rainey Bourgeois. I live at 23 Bigwood Drive. I just kind of want a clarification here on the zoning board of adjustments to grant the special exception for residential. In parentheses, in that one of the paragraphs, it says, other than a planned unit development. Isn't that what this is being proposed as?
I'm looking for that wording. Jillian, can you help me out on that? Where's they seeing that?
It says residential other than planned unit development in the specific section of the ordinance that it's
okay.
referring to.
All right, I'm sorry, what was your question again?
Well, this project is being presented as a planned unit development, isn't it?
Flint,
Is
what is it being presented as? So,
This is presented as strictly a multifamily residential site.
I'm sorry?
It was presented as strictly a multifamily residential site.
Can I quote something out of the meeting that was on December 20th of 2016?
sure.
Attorney Michael had said in one of his paragraphs here that PDU is a standard allowed for 225, 250 units, but only 200 one- and two-bedroom, three-bedroom units are proposed. I mean, he specified it as a PDU himself, so.
PDU or PU,
No,
Public
P-
Urban
PUD,
Development?
I'm sorry.
So
PUD.
Public Urban Development, okay.
Planned unit development is what I was looking at.
Plan, I'm sorry. Plan,
You're looking at plan?
Give me 1 second on that. Okay. So, so you're stating
I'm
that
against,
that's what
I'm
he said,
against
I
this
mean.
whole project, apparently.
I
live on
based on
Bigwood
that.
Drive. I concur with Rich, excuse me, I can pronounce your last name. Traffic is horrible, and I can't believe installing or putting up 280 condo units, apartments, or whatever is going to help that flow any way whatsoever. The intersection doesn't have crosswalks, so people really can't flow around that intersection, which is going to cause more delays for traffic if you start putting pedestrian crosswalks in there. So there's a lot. It's a lot. I think it's a little too much. I'd rather see a commercial facility there myself, because I know people go home at night, and like I said, I'm abutting the property, that 5-acre property that they're looking to develop.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Attorney Michael, if you wanted to grab the mic, and because I know you wanted to address that comment.
At the time of the planning board hearing, I was drawing comparisons to various sections of the ordinance regarding densities that might be allowed depending on the style and nature of development. I wasn't suggesting that this was a PUD at all. I was merely drawing comparisons of different ordinance provisions. I did say that at the meeting, it's in my notes, but the purpose of it wasn't to say this was a PRD.
Okay. I do recognize what you're saying, and I know the meeting that you're referring to,
Okay.
and the comments that are made, and I do understand what you're saying on that, and recognize against it. Again, this part of the determination if residential should be put in there, as far as final plans or what the final account of apartments, and whether it be 200 or 280 or is that's something that the planning board is going to have definitively approved before they can even start doing anything. So, but I recognize what you're saying, and no, I do appreciate it. I actually took notes on what you're saying.
Thank you
so
very
I do
much.
appreciate that. Anybody else want to speak for or against? Anybody else before I close the public hearing? All right. I'm closing the public hearing.
Make one more comment?
Yes, quickly, please. Yes.
I'll be very quick. I can appreciate what I'm hearing, but the rubber is kind of meeting the road on this site, and I say that seriously. And we believe this is the best proposal. I know I'm repeating myself. I apologize, but there's nothing for nothing, and we're doing our best to do what I believe is the best way to handle this in its location. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Comments? Discussion? I think in looking at the map and looking at it, I understand the idea and the mixed use, and that is something that the 10-year plan, they did discuss that, and I know that we do have a mixed use unit going in, like I had mentioned earlier, the Merrimack Commons. As proposed, I don't see the people who are in the apartment complexes down by the Circle walking to Shaw's. I just don't see them doing that. I understand it's not mixed use per se, but it's encompassing the mixed use or encompassing the idea of mixed use. But quite frankly, the people that are down there, I don't see them walking to Shaw's. I certainly don't see them walking to the hospital or in the medical facilities. Maybe walk to the movie theater, but that's about it. And likewise, the people that are up towards the D'Angelo side, I really don't see them walking all the way down. I know traffic is a planning. I would be curious to know if their planning if their traffic had taken in consideration, or if the planning board from up traffic, and maybe you can comment on this, has taken into consideration that Springwood Suites or the hotel there is about another 150 plus potential cars that could be there at any given time, because it is an extended stay. So you're talking of more, not necessarily 500 cars if there's two people in each apartment. You're talking more like 600 or 700 cars potentially in that area. Now, granted, the hotel comes, goes, all of that, but it's not always going to be capacity. But and again, planning deals more with the traffic side of things. Len, I know that you were in that team over there, but I really don't see the people living down near the movie theater walking up towards Shaw's, and I don't see those people walking all the way down. That's just that. So the whole idea of using mixed use, to me, I don't really like to associate that, because I don't think it's that close. Although I understand the reference that Attorney Michael was making towards it. That's my comment, my opinion on it. Is there any other comments from the board? Any other discussion items? By all means.
I'm still looking at our options here. And that intersection is bad now. There's no question. I don't know what the town can do based on what the state has control over. but I'm looking at the potential for something that's significantly worse. Now, if the planning board's looking at this and we approve this, they'll go to the planning board. I'll tell you, planning board's gonna be looking at traffic very, very closely, and they're gonna be demanding some real good answers, and I'm not sure there are any good answers. And it may not make it through the planning board, based on what's there. But I think looking at just saying, can we allow residential use in this area that's a commercial? I think, from what we're looking at, I think that's a reasonable thing to do. We've considered 3 other sites that do multi-use. And no, this is not multi-use, but conceptually, it could be considered. If we look at the Flatley property, if we look at the site at the corner of Industrial Drive, and we look at the site down in South Merrimack, or South DW Highway, all of those sites were proposing commercial and residential, and every one of them wanted to do the residential first because that was where the demand was, and none of them had any idea that they could do the commercial anytime soon. So the other point is, we're saying residential east and west of the Turnpike. This is right adjacent to the Turnpike. So I think fits with the concept that the master plan has been proposing. Now, like I said, I'm not making any statement of opinion as to whether I think this proposal is going to go through the planning board. But I think just based on the criteria that we have to determine tonight as to whether or not residential could move into the commercial, and again, I compare it to the 3 sites we've already, or planning has already gone through and approved on those other 3 areas where you're putting residential and commercial. I don't see how we can say this isn't appropriate or that we can't allow this. Like I said, I'm not making any opinion whatsoever as to whether this is appropriate or not. And I have some personal opinions, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying, for what we are doing tonight at the zoning board level, is it appropriate to allow a residential use on this particular site, commercial site? And I think the answer is yes. Now, all the other issues aside, I think just if we narrow our focus just to that one question, I think it's a yes.
Tony?
Have any of the petitioner talked to the state referencing the traffic? I know that goes to the planning board, but I'm just curious, how far have you talked to the state pertaining to this program, this development?
I'll reopen the public hearing for this question.
Oh, I'm
yes.
sorry.
That's okay.
It's
Sorry.
been a long day.
I didn't want to overstep.
No, that's okay. No,
I'm on my own zoning board, so
Okay.
trying to be cautious here.
Yep.
Yes, we have reached out to the state. That's where we were able to find out who owns what out there. We did discuss different improvements, obviously all kind of conceptual in nature, no pen and pencil on a piece of paper to try to figure out what's going on. But that's where we came up with the idea of the adaptive traffic signals that I had discussed earlier. That is something that they are pursuing. To change around their traffic signal equipment to make them operate more efficiently.
Thank you.
Sorry, hold on. Yeah, he's already said,
Yep.
he said, yeah, he said.
Thank you.
All right, so now I'm going to reclose the public hearing.
Stick my head in the news?
Yeah. Any other questions or any other comments on the board that you want to make?
Did you have any?
Lenny?
Traffic, although we have concerns about it, is not bottom line our problem. It's a planning board issue. This traffic, let me just suggest this. The traffic that would be associated with this site, no matter what the use is, is short trip traffic. It's coming off of South Main Street, it's coming off the Turnpike or Continental Boulevard and going into its little cubbyhole. The traffic that backs up on Turkey Hill Road and Amherst Road, well, that's traffic that's coming from the whole western sector of town. Has nothing to do with this site. This site didn't create that traffic, but that's being what it may. Nationally, statewide, they're telling us to put some residential units where the industrial and commercial areas are. This concept does that, whether it's this particular plan, but housing on this site is the most logical use for it. Just because it happens to be on the other side of the turnpike shouldn't be the straw that broke the camel's back. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I did, but I lost it.
There's no other comments. I'm going to ask for a motion.
It left me.
Okay. Can I have a motion, please?
I need to find my, I move that we grant special exception under section 2.02.3C1 of the zoning ordinance to permit a residential use within the C2 district. Parcels are located at 4 and 6 Industrial Park Drive in the C2 General Commercial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. Tax map 4D, lots 076 and 077.
Special exception as well?
This is on the special exception
No, you got it. Okay.
with the, including the conditions recommended by staff.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Okay. 3 yes, 2 no, 0 abstention. Next petition. The next one would be 4 Executive Park Drive, LLC petitioner owner, variance under section 3.02 and section 3.02, note 2 of the zoning ordinance to permit a residential use west of FE Turnpike, FE Everett Turnpike with approximate residential density of 13.3 units per acre. The parcels are located at 4 and 6 Executive Park Drive in the C2 General Commercial Aquifer Conservation District's tax map 4D, lots 076 and 077, case number 2017-13. Attorney Michael, I think you wanted to reference your earlier comments.
I did, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I want to incorporate by reference my earlier comments prior to the going into the special exception criteria into this case so that the record would reflect that that same information was presented to the board as it relates to this variance application. Therefore, I don't need to, repeat myself. I want to keep things moving for the board this evening.
If you just allow me one thing, Jillian, that can be done?
Sure.
Okay. The only thing is that I would need you to, because it wasn't mentioned in the last one, because it was special exception on this variance, you do need to do unnecessary hardship, does need to be read in. You had granted substantial justice, public interest, spirit of the ordinance, that
I'll
type of thing.
just clarify, these are different criteria that he'll be going through.
Different criteria.
Oh, okay.
I mean, some of them overlap, but sometimes it's very difficult to kind of interpolate, use whatever word you'd like, the special exception and the variance, and some of them are very close, and again, somewhat subjective occasionally. I think we all know that. I'd like to point out that, just to clarify a couple of things prior to getting into the elements, and I'll get to them very quickly. The master plan does discuss one of the concerns that I heard, and that's changing demographics. And there are people, a quote from the master plan, aging of baby boomers and their preference for walkable living in proximity to services, shopping, recreation, transportation. They want options. They want to be able to walk. They want to use bikes. And I recognize that there are those that won't do this. I recognize that though there are those that want to jump in their car and do it. But I want to make it clear that there is recognition by the town, by the master plan, that there is a change, and that the same habits that we may have been used to 10 or 15 years ago may not be moving forward with the current population that we have. With that in mind, I'd like to address the variance application. It's the same land, it's the same proposal. There's nothing different about what we discussed, so that'll save me from hopefully repeating myself, but we'll certainly do our best to respond to any questions of the board. Granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. We have a little law on some of these criteria, unlike the special exception criteria. The courts have said to be contrary to the public interest, the variance must unduly and in a marked degree conflict with the ordinance, such that it violates the ordinance's basic zoning objectives. The interesting thing about this, and I pointed this out at the outset, is we're looking at a very kind of amorphous zoning objective. No multifamily west of the turnpike. I kind of go like this and go, yeah. And what does that solve? I explained it to you. I explained why it was there and the fact that they took the big paintbrush and used that as a boundary line to make things simple when we enacted zoning early on in Merrimack. And that doesn't apply to this area. It has really no useful purpose. I think the master plan says it better when it says areas that are abutting or near the turnpike or Route 3. I think that that recognizes some of these areas that are impacted by commercial as well as the highways themselves. But that's the issue. The second is density. And Mr. Chairman, you're correct. The Planning Board will have to take a look at that. You're correct. Our request is 280. There is no real density, multifamily density, west of the turnpike again. So it's very difficult to get your arms around what that is. The best thing I can tell you is that it was designed to prevent this, I suppose, commercial or more commercial styled activity from those areas that were classically totally residential, which this is not. This is not. The area here is not classically residential. We know from the development that's taken place. The appropriate standard is it going to be used safely and reasonably and in a manner that protects the town's health, safety, and convenience and general welfare. We believe that with the appropriate infrastructure that we've discussed, the sidewalks, ingress and egress, appropriate parking, municipal utilities, there isn't anything that's contrary to the public interest. I recognize that there are people that believe that the traffic issue is the sine qua non and the problem. I would point out, as one of your members has pointed out, that no matter what we do there, there's going to be traffic, no matter what happens there. So we've got two choices. We leave it fallow with nothing happening, not drawing tax revenues, or we do something that makes sense and is consistent with our planning, which this is. And anything we do, there's some traffic. We believe this is the best project as it relates to the existing traffic situation. We believe clearly that this will not be contrary to the public interest based upon its location, and it does not threaten, the court's words, threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. It does not. Will some traffic inconvenience people? That's correct. I agree with Mr. Worcester. A lot of the traffic there is from the other areas of town. It's got nothing to do with the development or this development being placed in this area. Thank you.
Any questions? Number two.
Thank you. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. Well, again, this is very similar to the public interest criteria stated in the Chester Rod and Gun Club case. And here, we're looking at the idea of the ordinance is really lost its idea. No multifamily west of the turnpike, and the numbers and density. It's really lost its meaning when you apply it to this particular parcel. Having said that, if we look at the spirit of the ordinance, to create a vibrant neighborhood under the master plan, a mixed-use neighborhood, in my terms of mixed use, I know it's not I recognize the discussion we've had about that. But where we're looking at underutilized land, when we're looking at underutilized areas that already exist commercially in town, I've pointed them out to you. We believe that this is a productive development that meets the spirit of the ordinance in terms of overall community development. And that's an important point when we discuss that particular item. We've got the nearby office building is not full, underuse of different buildings in the area. We believe that we're protecting against adverse impacts. We clearly believe that the spirit of the ordinance is being observed because we believe that good available housing supports commercial development, supports it, and keeps it in Merrimack, and it will support the existing commercial uses as well. Thank you.
Questions? Number 3?
Granting the variance would do substantial justice. Well, again, the courts have said it's done when the loss of denying the variance exceeds the gain to the general public in strictly enforcing the ordinance. Again, the biggest comment I've heard is traffic. Traffic. That will be looked at very closely by the planning board. We've brought it to your attention this evening. I brought my expert here. We believe that clearly denying this use, leaving this land vacant, because commercial is not down the road for this parcel. It just isn't. Yeah, there was a medical facility built across the street, St. Joseph's. Go over there, you can see it. I got it approved, as a matter of fact. So we already have a small medical facility there. I doubt seriously anybody's going to build a hospital, although I will tell you that when people were discussing the assisted living, somebody was also looking at maybe some small medical facility attached to it. It still didn't work. We still couldn't get it off the ground and make it work. And that's prior to the current owner that we're talking to now. We believe clearly that substantial justice is done. I'd point out one case, Harrington versus Warner. The board may be familiar with it. This case, the applicant showed that substantial justice would be done in granting the variance because it would improve, and they used the word dilapidated, and this is not a dilapidated area. I don't want to confuse the board in that regard. And it was a mobile home case, and it would provide affordable housing to that area. And the court took a look at this, and they basically said, look, this is an area that's just sitting. It's an area that's not going anywhere. Again, in their words, they used dilapidated. Here, what we've got is the 16 acres, 20 acres of land. And what do we have out there? The suites take up 1.7 acres. The balance of this is vacant with the rubble of the Hilton. That's what we have out there right now. And by the way, if we develop it, we're going to take the rubble and reuse it. We're going to recycle that rubble. I want to make that clear. But the point I'm making is that the courts have taken a look at this when they look at substantial justice and they say, wait a minute, what's going on? Is it usable? Is it fair to keep the land the way it is? And it's not. We have been looking. This land is this board is well aware. I was here for the Marriott. I was here before the board. I was here on some of these proposals. And we have been trying for over a decade, to make some good use of this property. And I would suggest to the board that, if we get stuck with the Executive Park Drive rebuild and another 5 years passes, we're going to be staring at this for a good long time. And that's not consistent with our planning and not consistent with your own master plan. We believe clearly that it's fair. We believe that it does not adversely impact the public, and we think that the burden on my client who can't develop this far exceeds any possible detriment to the public's rights. Thank you.
Question? The next one, the values of?
Values. We've taken a close look at this. We're seeking to revitalize an underutilized neighborhood and area by complementing it with the residential that we're talking about. I'd point out that in your file there's a letter We had a respected appraiser from Keller Williams, Bill Weidecker, go out and take a close look at this. And the board ordinarily doesn't accept paperwork after the fact, so we got it submitted with our application. And although I believe it without question that it's not going to diminish surrounding property values, he has confirmed that there'll be no diminution in value, and he also indicated that he felt that by creating a more dynamic atmosphere, very likely it would help enhance some of the surrounding property values in the area instead of leaving it in its current state. So I'll rely on that, and we firmly believe that based upon his expert opinion and the proposal that we're making, there'll be no diminution of value. Thank you.
Number 5.
Hardship. Owing to the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in an unnecessary hardship. No fair or substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance and the specific application of that provision to the property because, well, the cause is fairly straightforward. Because I'm still trying to figure out the logic of the two provisions that are stopping us, which is the, west of the turnpike issue and the density. I've given you most of the history of it. There's not much more to talk about because this has been around, those provisions have been around for quite some time. I've pointed out in my discussion, I'll be brief, the property is unique in its size. It doesn't really support a huge commercial development. It does not. And I'll point out, and I made reference to this in my prior remarks, I want to repeat myself, that putting a very intense commercial development to make this work, it's still unlikely that they'd be able to pay for the off-site improvements to solve the planning board's traffic problems. We've looked at this. Many good projects fall by the wayside because of the off-site improvement costs. And one of the reasons I was able to get Charlie Morgan into Zyla's site, why do you think? Not a traffic issue. Storage. Perfect use for the site, really. But here, this consists of a large swath of developable and contiguous land that runs right close to the turnpike. It's parallel, it's close to the turnpike, near the other commercial developments in the area. It's on a dead-end road. It abuts various commercial activities, which could be used by the apartments. It's unique in its history and its years of underutilization. We believe that based upon where it is in relation to the other land in the area, and there's nothing like it in the area, nothing. In this area, there's nothing like it. We believe that the fact that we literally had to demolish part of the real estate, that was part of it, the building, the fact that we have done more than due diligence to try and do something else with it, has shown that this property is unique, has a hardship, and quite frankly, its best utilization at this point, and in accordance with the master plan, is residential. I would point out that there's an economic component to hardship. Ever since the case of Garrison versus Henniker, 2006, the Supreme Court adopted a theory, and they said unnecessary hardship can require a determination of whether the zoning restriction as applied interferes with the landowner's reasonable use of the property, which it does. This factor includes consideration of the landowner's ability to receive a reasonable return of his or her investment. Well, right now, there is no return on the balance of the investment. My clients expended significant sums to buy this property. Yes, they have sold a small portion for the suites, 1.7 acres. The balance of this right now is zero return. We pay taxes and we get nothing. The court went on to say expert testimony is not required. Here we believe the Hilton, it's been demolished, we're paying taxes, there's no reasonable use, no expectation of return, and the court has said that in this instance, this years of no return on this piece of property is part of the hardship consideration. And again, I'll repeat myself, we've had several studies, we've done more than enough due diligence over 10 years, and I've been involved in a lot of it, to try and make this economically feasible as a type of commercial site. It hasn't worked. And in the meantime, the Shaw's Plaza on DW Highway has become non-existent. We haven't further developed other good commercial sites in the town. The proof, ladies and gentlemen, is in the pudding. And any economically reasonable use of this does require a variance so that we can move forward with it. I point out the second prong is it reasonable? We believe that this is a very reasonable use. I'm not going to repeat myself again. The dead-end street, where it's located, the utilization of the property will not create a significant, we believe, adverse traffic impact. It makes sense to allow this to move ahead for the reasons that we've stated. Thank you.
Any questions for Attorney Michael? Gentlemen? Good. Is there anybody that'd like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anybody that'd like to speak against this petition?
My name is Susan Ducharme. I live on 21 Bigwood Drive. My husband and I have been there for almost 49 years here, so I'm sure that you realize that we've seen a lot of changes. In the beginning, I have some questions as well as comments. In the beginning, when the hotel was built, the abutters were taken into consideration, and there was a buffer between our properties and the hotel, and it was promised to us that no one would ever build there. I think it was a 100-foot butter. There's plenty of people here from Bigwood Drive as well, and I think we're all in shock with this building. And I certainly understand that something has to go there. I get it. My concern is how close to my property is it? Does it impact the brook? And I know your concerns have to do with density. I certainly tried to figure that out. That is zoned as
Commercial.
light commercial or
Yes.
heavy commercial? Light. I think heavy is factories, if I read correctly. So is this considered light residential or heavy residential? Because the amount of people that you're going to stick in there, it sounds to me like it's heavy. So are you going to take a light commercial zoning area and make it a heavy residential? Or are you going to make it a light residential? Does that make sense?
Yes, I've not heard light or heavy commercial. I've heard of commercial, industrial, and residential, but I haven't heard of light industrial or heavy
Yeah,
residential,
well,
as it relates to
as
at least the zones in Merrimack.
This is zone general commercial. There is a limited commercial district as well, but this one is general commercial.
Which means you can't have a factory, but you can have a PC connection or whatever.
It's not an industrial district, it's a commercial district, so a factory.
Oh, commercial, okay.
So
got
you
it.
could have a PC connection, but you're absolutely right. You couldn't have a steel fabrication
Right,
facility.
Right.
So is it a big jump to go from that type of commercial to this? And when I say density, I'm thinking of the amount of people in that, whatever acreage is in there. That seems dense to me. That seems like a
right.
heavy. I know that's probably not the verbiage you use, but that's what was on the computer. So it's a concern to me as an abutter. I think we need to take the abutters into consideration. Many who have been here 40-plus years with a beautiful brook in the backyard and have already been impacted by the sweeps because we can hear the highway a lot more now. So, because more trees have been taken down. So the more trees you take down, maybe the buildings will help a little. I'm not even too sure. What bothers me, if I read this correctly,
Can you actually, Susan, can you grab grab that mic over there?
Well,
so you can
I'll
speak
just
to it?
point.
Okay.
The way the brook goes, it's all well and good, but this, somebody's living right there.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is terrible. The Heberts are here. Like I said, we're all kind of in shock to look at it. And I know we spoke of traffic, but really, I think that goes to the planning board, and we can fight with that later. So I'm thinking, are they planning for 280 because that's the only way you make a profit? Or can we cut it back?
I think in regards to what you're saying is, if they were building a large company to drop there, they could put it in the same place and we would never see it. So we're only seeing
They
it
would bypass you.
Yep. So the only reason we're seeing this is because it's apartments. So something much larger with much higher density can be placed there without our governance.
So this would almost be a drop.
Because of the commercial zoning.
Right. So this would almost be a drop as far as that goes. Now, as far as buffers, as far as final site plan, as far as final housing numbers, that is something that the planning board has to establish. And you're absolutely right. Everyone that is on, did you say Bigwood Drive? I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah. Everyone who's on that has absolutely every right and responsibility to stand in on not only this one, but the planning board meetings
Absolutely.
to say, what are you going to do to put in a buffer, to keep a green zone, to keep that. And as far as the brook, I don't know. Don't think there's conservation back there, is there? No. So I mean, as far as the brook, I'd imagine I don't think that there's going to be dumping or anything in the brook if that's
No.
what the concern is.
No.
But as far as the buffer zone, as far as the green zone, I would wholeheartedly make sure that, and that because that becomes a planning thing, and make sure that planning is aware of it, and that the developer is held accountable. I agree with you.
Those
as
are
it stands, those
they're
last two,
outrageous.
just
Yeah.
those probably are one of the reasons why I personally don't think that residential belongs there. I think that, but this final plan will be approved by planning, and I do think that everybody that lives on Bigwood Drive should take an active part in this, because there should be a buffer zone, or there should be, and has every right to ask about the green area that's there. So I do agree with you on that. Unfortunately, as far as the board, we can't necessarily address that other than to let you know that, yes, I'm sure that they will take that into consideration with the residents. As far as when it was whatever previous hotel was, if a promise was made.
That's a long time ago. Yeah, I understand
and
that.
they
But if
couldn't
it was
make that
done
promise.
once, we can do it again.
I would highly recommend that. And like I said, those two buildings on the end there, that was my major concern with that area. That was otherwise the site itself is, the rest of the buildings are relatively close to Executive Drive and the
yeah.
highway. So, and there is a good amount of green area behind them. So,
Which is my backyard, yes. Okay, again, I had a thought and it left me.
Me too.
Density-wise, I am with you. I hold exception to the two last buildings. Doesn't affect my backyard, kinda does, but the neighbors on Bigwood Drive that I know, it definitely affects them, and it's,
and maybe that's
I mean,
something.
she's gonna be able to pass toilet paper
Right,
to
and
that
maybe
apartment.
that's
It's ridiculous.
And maybe it's something that and maybe that's something that if this
Yeah.
goes to planning regarding that the residents there could actually petition and maybe get the builder to change their mind, move the buildings further
Forward.
in, or redevelop the plot to make it more acceptable to
Right.
the abutters. Because certainly the builder's intent, much like anyone else's intent, is not to, impede on people's homes. And it's just, that's not
understand.
good for the town, it's not good for the people, so.
Right.
But I do understand your
49
concerns.
years of being
Yeah,
split. It's
yeah.
difficult. My thought was, there's 280 apartments there, full-time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yeah, they could put a commercial place there, have more people, but it's not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I agree with you.
either.
I agree.
People go home at night.
I
So
agree.
Not always.
there comes the debt. Yeah, really? Depends where you work. Well, if you put a hospital there, nobody's going home, but staff-wise. There's that density thing again,
I do
in my
agree
mind.
on that.
So I had to say something.
No, and I appreciate you, I appreciate you
Okay.
coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any- Is there anybody else that would like to speak against this petition? Yes. All right.
I'm Bob Hebert. I'm in a butter. I'm one of the ones that gets hit in the backyard.
Yep.
According to the plans that I've seen and whatnot, I don't agree with this at all. I will fight that the best I can. My difficulty is that what they're proposing is a building that's going to be as tall as my house. When I stand in my backyard, it'll be almost 30 feet high. It's totally ridiculous. The value of my house is going to go right down the tubes. Whether they say it's going to help economically or not, it doesn't matter to me because I'm not going to make out at all. There is no buffer there to speak of because when you start doing all of the work that's going to be there, all your greenery is gone. To have it put in, we've discussed this when they wanted to put a company in there. And they said, we'll put up some pine trees, we'll put up this. It's got to, they're making money, I'm not. The town's going to make out, yes. But the people that are going to make out are the people that are going to put these things in and then walk away. I think the people that are living here that have to go through the traffic and everything else are the people that should have the biggest say in it, and that those are the people that have the least amount of say. Because the town says, well, we need the revenue. Well, we've been doing revenue for me, it's been over 30 years. I've come to these things only a few times. I'm not comfortable doing it. I've got a whole list of questions. Most of them haven't been answered satisfactorily to me. Okay, when they talk about putting in 80 units in my backyard and having 100 parking places for 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, the parking doesn't agree. Most of the people that are going to live there are going to be 2 people. Each one's going to have a car. You got a parking problem already. All of this stuff is going to go through the intersections. You want to walk to the stores, you want to do everything, put the crosswalks in, have the people push the button on the lights. Now you're going to tie up traffic in 4 directions, not just 1 or 2. And that's going to be every time somebody does walk to the store. I don't think it's a good idea. If I've got to go to the board to fight it, I will do that.
I recommend it.
As little as it's going to do, I'll bring you with me because you disagree with this too. Is that okay?
Sure.
I don't agree with it at all.
I can try to give your questions answered as satisfactory as possible. I don't know how much good that'll do, but I can have them, those questions answered for you. Again, like I said, I don't know how much good it'll do.
Yeah,
I do, but I highly recommend it.
You know, to me, you're talking about putting in all of these units with all these families in it, families, 2 cars per unit, plus the hotel. And every time somebody wants to come out of there, you tie up traffic. That's every time. That's going to be at the busiest times in the morning going out and the busiest times at night coming home. In a business, you're going to break it up during the day. Yeah, your workers are going to go in, but after that, it's just going to be people in and out, in and out. Most of the businesses that you put in there, you cannot put in 4,000 people.
I would, okay.
Okay? I just don't agree. I think if we had been informed of the last meeting so that we could have an idea what was going on, we could have better prepared than what we did.
Which one? You're referring to the
20th.
planning meeting?
Yeah.
Jillian, were they?
That was a conceptual meeting, not a public hearing.
Okay. Which is, so that's why abutters were notified of it,
I know we weren't.
obviously. So,
But just the concept that they're showing you here to get things passed, had we known that this concept was going to be in existence, that they wanted to do that,
I'm sure you would have been here, yes.
definitely. I've said my piece for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ebert.
Thank you.
Does anybody else like to speak against? Any other questions before I close the public hearing? Okay. Yes, please. Do you have a question?
No, I'm just going to say something. So.
I only have 5 things to say. First, we've had experts look at this. We believe the traffic for this project will be less than a commercial development. I'm going to leave it there. Second, we're entitled to reasonable use of our property. And we've been looking at this for over a decade. This property's been looked at. I'm not going to repeat myself again. We've been looking very hard at trying to do the right thing in accordance with your master plan. Third, we plan an excellent complex with good leases and good controls. We don't expect, there's no bar room here. We expect people to act responsibly or they'll be removed.
All right, can we just keep the comments down, or I'm going to have to ask people to leave the hearing?
I would point out that in the ordinance, there is no commercial height restriction. If you're concerned about height, a commercial building could be higher, and most importantly, the commercial setback is 40 feet. If you'll see on the plan, it's unfortunate the plan is small because it gives really a different view of things. The closest house to this building here is over 300 feet. This is a 100-foot buffer line here. You've got another 100 feet here, another 100 feet here. As I say, you can't look at this plan and, immediately grasp that somehow we're in someone's backyard. We're not. We intend to keep as much of the buffer as possible, and I can certainly have our people take a look at moving the 2 buildings in parcel 6 closer down. I mean, we haven't looked at that carefully. We could certainly look at that, and the planning board may do so as well after hearing comments from the abutters. But I would point out that commercially, we could be back here, back in here. I'm just showing you 100 feet for the purposes of showing it to you. So these are not close, really close to any of the abutters' buildings. We are sensitive to that, which is why we made sure that we kept them down in that lot for you. On that, I close. Thank you.
Any other comments before I close the public hearing? All right, closing the public hearing. Discussion on the board. You want me to go first? I'll go first. Much like the last one, there's a couple of areas here as far as substantial justice, unnecessary hardship, diminution of surrounding values. I don't think that those have been met personally. And I have questions regarding those 3 areas specifically. Spirit of the ordinance, okay, but those other 3 are questions from me, from my concern regarding this this petition. Is there any other discussion in the comments? Ben? Rich?
I was just going to say that although values of surrounding properties could be considered subjective, I think it's a huge and rational fear. So I would concur with that, because we don't know how it's going to impact surrounding properties. Although, on the flip side, maybe this won't do as much damage as a large company that can go right up to the property line. So if we're gonna look at that, we also have to take into consideration that we won't be looking at this at all if this is then sold to a company that decides to actually put something up there that we'll never see.
Yeah.
Lynn?
A couple of things. I have a concern with those two buildings. And I disagree with Attorney Michael as far as the buffer space. I took the legend that's at the bottom of that diagram and I measured, and there's approximately 75 feet between one building and the boundary. And the houses are closer to the boundary than that building is. So I don't believe you've got 300 feet between the house and the buildings. I'm just,
And it's not a scaled plan.
I'm looking at, I'm just looking at the scale that's on the plan, and I measured it, and I think it's closer than that. Planning's gonna look at that, and you know that as well as I do. I do agree that there is a hardship here. I look at how long they have been trying to market this property. I look at how long it's been vacant and, to be perfectly honest, an eyesore. And when the planning board approved the Wynwood Suites, it wasn't conditional on the Hilton being removed, and I was very pleased to see that they did take down the Hilton, because that was just, it was an eyesore, and it was an issue that was coming. A couple of things have been mentioned regarding the availability of rental units. I'm somewhat involved in the real estate industry, not directly, but tangentially, and there is a dearth of rental units in this town. We have a lot of people that work for Fidelity, work for Atrium, work for a number of these others. They're young professionals. They're not married. They have no kids, and this is what the new generation is doing. And if we look at what, particularly what the property at Industrial Drive has talked about, they talked to the Fidelities, they talked to the Atriums, they said, what do your people need? And this is exactly what they're talking about, is not 2 and 3 bedroom units. I don't believe there's any 3 bedrooms that have been proposed here. They're talking about small units for an individual, for not families. Now, could families move in there? Sure they can. Traditionally, if you look at condo complexes, which are 1 and 2 bedroom units, there's less than, I think it used to be like 0.6 kids per unit in those. We've got a school district that's have declining enrollment, so I don't think that even if we do have kids there that it's going to affect that. But this is similar to what some of these other large developments are proposing, and giving the people in town, or some of the people, the professionals in town, some added availability of housing that they need. We've had a long period of lost revenue. That's not the developer's problem, but the town has the lost revenue. If we can put something in here that will generate some revenue that's reasonable, I think that can only help the town. The east versus west issue with regard to the turnpike was developed way back, before a lot of the other commercial stuff has been developed in town, and I think if, rather than looking at east versus west, if we look at proximity to the turnpike as an appropriate use for this, that makes more sense. We also have an elderly overlay district that was, again, developed quite a while ago, when really the only retail, grocery stuff was the Shaw's Plaza in town. And it was developed around that area. It extends well west of the Turnpike, but it has a much higher density. And I think if we look at that and use that as a benchmark for doing something here with a higher density, again, it's close to the Turnpike. We're not putting this on Craig Drive. We're not putting this on Spruce Street. We're not putting this on Back River Road. We're putting this where there is already commercial stuff that's all around it. The highway is right there. I think the density makes more sense. And as far as the traffic is concerned, boy, I hope this gives us some leverage with the state, because they have fought us tooth and nail to make changes to that general intersection to alleviate some of the traffic, and they have resisted it and resisted it. And if this gives us some leverage to get the state to allow, or to make, or to allow made some of the changes to the signaling in that intersection, and if what they're proposing here for change in technology will help with the state, I'm all for it. We got to do something with that intersection, regardless of what happens with this particular development.
Lenny?
Yeah, I believe that the hardship criteria is covered in the fact that the hotel, originally the Hilton, wasn't self-sustaining. It died and went away. We've had several proposals come in on this site. They all died and went away. It has some problems, and these people have found a way to make it viable. I think that they're satisfying the hardship criteria on that issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Questions? Discussion? Motions?
I move we approve the variances requested under section 3.02.
Microphone.
Mike?
I move that we approve the variance requested under section 3.02 and section 3.02 note 2 of the zoning ordinance to permit a residential use west of the FER Turnpike with an approximate residential density of 13.3 units per acre. The parcels are located at 4 and 6 in Executive Park Drive in the C2 General Commercial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 4D, lots 76 and 77, subject to the conditions stated in the memo from the staff.
All in favor, say aye. Oh, sorry. Second. All right, Lenny seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? 3-2-2. All right, or 3-2-0. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Next petition. Timothy A. Peliquin, LLS petitioner, and Eric's Jersons, owner, variance under section 3.02.4 of the zoning ordinance to permit the construction of a new septic system 13 feet from the side property line, whereas 20 feet is required. The parcel is located at 12 Cary Drive in the R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation District, tax map 5B, lot 176, case number 2017-14. And there are two petitions. There are two petitions. There's this one, and then the next one is the construction of a single-family dwelling. We're taking the septic first, correct?
Should we do it in the opposite order?
Certainly can. We do it in the opposite order. There.
Let me read in the second one since you're already seated. And we'll do, yeah, that actually makes probably better sense. Timothy L. Peliquin, LLS petitioner, Eric's Jersons, owner, variance under section 2.02 .76 of the zoning ordinance to permit the construction of a single-family dwelling 20 feet from the wetland, whereas 40 feet is required. Parcel is located at 12 Cary Drive in the R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts, Tax Map 5B, Lot 176, case number 2017-15. Actually, we'll hear that one first, and then we'll do the septic one. I
Okay.
apologize, it's just been a long night.
No, all good.
And I appreciate your patience.
Understood.
All right, so, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Tim Peliquin. I'm a licensed land surveyor. My company is Promise Land Survey. And this is unsolicited comment, but astute discussion for the last. Of course, that's very hard, but you're all very, very knowledgeable, and I appreciated your inputs, you know, good and bad from the audience as well. I thought it was well done.
Thank you. Can you just give us kind of like 500 words or less what we're looking to do? And
Yep,
then,
sure.
can you
A
get
brief
into the
overview
points?
is this, that there's a vacant lot of record that exists, known as 12 Cary Drive. It was a subdivision that occurred back in 1967. There was a re-subdivision that happened in 1972. Most of the homes were built somewhere 67 to 72 in that neighborhood. This lot stayed vacant. Perhaps part of the reason is there's a little bit of a wetland on the lot, maybe not the most desirable lot within the subdivision, so it stayed vacant for a whole number of years. It's been taxed as a buildable lot. It's been, et cetera. It just has not been built on. In 2014, the owner, who's here tonight, Eric, I forget how you pronounce his last name, but
I think I mispronounced it.
He got a septic approval from the state of New Hampshire to build on this, and then it sat for a while longer. Then came along Habitat for Humanity, and Habitat for Humanity has an interest. He has an interest in donating this property to Habitat for Humanity as a buildable project for. They have a family in mind. I don't necessarily need to get into those details, but a very small use, I can tell you that, and a very rewarding use. And so what I've designed as part of this, part of what we did was we did an accurate survey of the parcel, because the septic design that was even done in 2014 said basically a licensed land surveyor needs to confirm these boundary lines because they weren't certain. So a survey of the neighborhood had to happen to bring this in, to locate the wetlands, to place the septic that was approved on the lot, and then figure out how we could how it could meet setback requirements. So as a result of that, we can put the building entirely on the lot, and I put a small one, a 24 by 32, which is a very conservative dwelling size. It's about as small as you'd want to construct a dwelling. So a 24 by 32 dwelling that happens to be at its closest point 20 feet to the wetland. Another point is 25 feet, another point is 26 feet, because there's wetlands kind of all around it. The septic, which is a separate application, happens to be 13 feet to the lot line, where 20 feet is required under your ordinance. I do want to point out that when the subdivision was approved, 67 to 72, 10 feet would have been acceptable because that was a state rule, and it's still a state rule to this day. So it's not violating any state rules in terms of 13 feet to the lot line. And I would suggest most of the septics in that neighborhood that are close to the lot line, for instance, the abutter, is certainly within that 10 feet, not the 20 feet rule that you now have in place.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, that's what we're looking to do, and I can try to read the points into the record. And
then just stop after each one, so if we have any questions.
Sure.
Thank
That'd
you.
be great. Thank you. Okay. So a variance was requested from section 2.02.7, parentheses 6 of the zoning ordinance to permit new construction of a two-bedroom dwelling. And I do want to point out it's a two-bedroom dwelling within 40 feet of the wetlands. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest because This lot was created by subdivision in 1967 as a buildable lot, and the 40-foot setback to wetland was not in place at the creation of this lot. Note, however, no impact or disturbance to any wetland area is proposed as part of this request. So, okay, I'll pause. No wetland impacts is what I'd want to say.
Question? Okay.
Thank you. The spirit of the ordinance is observed because the developer/owner will be afforded the right to build, excuse me, the right to build a new dwelling on this lot, as have others within this created 1967 neighborhood/subdivision.
Questions? Number 3?
Granting the variance would do substantial justice because a new dwelling will be able to be constructed for a great cause, Habitat for Humanity / VA. And I put that in, I wasn't, it's just an editorial that the family that they potentially targeting is a veteran, per the previous points articulated.
Question? Okay, proceed.
For the following reasons, the values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished in that the new dwelling is new construction and is set back a bit from Cary Drive, making the structure attractive in appearance and should not devalue any property values within this neighborhood.
Questions? Not unnecessary hardship?
Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property because, for all the reasons stated, this lot was created in 1967 as a buildable lot and taxed as such since, as were others within the subdivision. And this variance would not have been necessary if that dwelling was constructed back in that period of time.
Number 2.
The proposed use is a reasonable one because the developer/new owner will be able to construct a small and attractive dwelling and be able to assist a family in need.
Any questions?
I think the criteria has been met.
Lynn? Okay. Anything you want to add in closing?
No, I think I've covered it, but I'll be glad to answer any questions the board or perhaps members of the public would have.
So you're the architect or surveyor?
Surveyor.
Surveyor. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I went out, saw the properties, kind of. I didn't really walk it, but I did go out by it. The most reasonable place to put the house is there. I mean, I noticed that there's a large wetlands section there. So
yes, based on a cross-covered ditch that was designed as part of the original subdivision, there was a culvert that crosses the road. There's a trap wetland right there.
Did you guys do any soil samples or?
Nope, but Tim Forweather from Meridian Land Services originally flagged that wetland. We located it as flagged wetlands as part of this.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony?
Can you repeat what you just said just now?
Could I repeat what I just said?
Yeah, pertaining to the wetlands in
Sure.
Meridian?
A wetland scientist had flagged the wetlands, and we physically located his wetlands, his wetland flags, his delineation of the wetlands.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody that
And
like to?
it agreed with the septic design, I guess I should say, too. So there's no changes to the wetland configuration as it was approved by the septic design.
How recent is the septic design?
2014, and that should be part of your packet, too.
Okay.
I did include that.
Tony?
No, I'm thinking. Keep on.
All right. In regards to the petition to erect the single-family dwelling Is there anybody that would like to speak in favor of this? Is there anybody that'd like to speak against this? Come on down. If you could actually just sign your name and see. Yeah, you just want to move your stuff.
Papers. My bad. But that's a plan we can look at.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name's Aiden Seltz-Wilps. This is my wife, Julie Seltz-Wilps. We are abutters. We are residents of 8 Cary Drive and owners of 10 Cary Drive, an abutting lot. We've been residents there for approximately 10 years. The neighborhood deals with a substantial moisture problem. Over time, since that neighborhood has been developed, we've seen the water table rise, and there's been substantial impact to the forest community around there. We've seen a lot of die-off of trees from water tables rising. Our property, which is right next door, in the 10 years that we've been there, we've experienced 2 quote-unquote 100-year rain events that brought a substantial amount of water into our finished basement just by seepage. And we currently have a sump pump, and it could not keep up. And our backyard, our lot right next to this property routinely fills that swamp that is over there. And that's what it is. It really is. And I strongly oppose this proposal without further information to understand how a structure and septic system can be built without further displacing the water. I do not understand the engineering behind that. If I were to walk that property right now, I would need hip boots, and I would sink. And I went out and took photographs of it today just to clarify where I stood on this to make sure I wasn't nuts. But I don't want to step on anybody developing an area. That's not my purpose here. I just don't see how we can avoid the neighborhood becoming more and more impacted with water. And it is a real problem.
In addition to the slab that they're putting down, which displaces water, we're removing trees. Trees, with their roots, drink water. So we now have taken yet another natural resource to absorb this water in these wetlands, and we've ripped them up. My husband has stated we've had water now twice, and that's extreme concern to us because our lower level is below ground level. I also would like to know when the soil samples were taken and if they've been compared to our droughts, because the last few years we've had droughts here, and I know for a fact that's when those soil samples were taken. I would like to see current soil samples with actual rainfall that we've had, and this is not unusual. It just happens to be that we've had a few years of unusual drought. So I would like to see those soil samples retaken now in an average normal rainfall to see what the results are. I would also feel more comfortable with a third party, the Army Corps of Engineers or the EPA, declaring what is truly a wetland and what is not. I think the Habitat for Humanity and the VA are noble causes, and I would never want to stand in the way of that or helping a family, but I don't want to do it to the detriment of our home and our neighbors' homes. I think we have a right to a warm, safe, mold-free house. And I don't have a lot of faith in the soil samples that were taken from 2014 to now, based on drought, and I'd like to see them done again, and I would love to see a third party. I think if I could see something from the Army Corps of Engineers or the EPA backing, what the surveyors have found, I'd feel more confident in this, but I just don't see how displacing water, it has to go somewhere. The only place it can feasibly go is into the neighbors' yards, into our yard.
Thank you.
Nope, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Does anybody, Lynn, do you want to comment on that?
I have a question for the petitioner. You mentioned a culvert.
Lynn, or Mike?
You mentioned a culvert. Where's that located, and which direction does the water flow?
It's pretty flat, and it's pretty stationary, and it's right.
If you look at this diagram,
Yep.
where is it?
It's on the westerlymost portion of the lot, right in this area.
It's not marked on the plan.
That's correct.
And which direction does it drain?
It's flat. It doesn't.
So it doesn't drain?
It doesn't drain. It goes back and forth. It's relatively a flat culvert.
So why do we have a culvert?
When they did the subdivision in 1967, they put a culvert there.
Any idea why?
No. Other than just to, it's a good question, actually, to connect these two wetlands was what I would suggest, because there is a wetland on the other side of Cary Drive. There is a wetland on the other side of Cary Drive.
And the soil samples you said were taken in 2014?
Yes, and yes. And if I can comment to some of the comments.
Please.
Okay. So soil samples, just that word, I'm not a soil scientist, I'm not a wetland scientist, but I work with them all the time. So the word soil sample, wetlands, Army Corps, EPA, wetland scientists know what they're doing. A wetland doesn't change year to year. It does not. It takes a decade for things to change because you need three criteria. You need soils that are gray, don't have a high chroma color. They're very dark soils, 4 to 8 inches and below. These are things I know. You need a wetland vegetation, and you need hydrology, which is water, for at least 1 month of the 12 months of the year. So those are the criteria. You need all three. There is a wetland here, no question, not arguing that. There's also upland. There's a good significant piece of upland, and that's what we're showing with the house, the septic, the test pitting, everything else was done, and the state approved a septic system there for a reason, because they do inspect.
So like I said, I drove by, I didn't go walking in there, but according to the gentleman's testimony, you need hip boots to go in there. I mean, building a house, and you're building a house in a swamp?
No, not by any means.
Because, I mean, that's going to affect foundation, and, I mean, I'm not an
Correct.
engineer, but...
Correct. And it's not, we're not building the house in the wetland. It's in the upland portion.
How will that affect drainage, though, into their backyard?
I can't answer exact drainage. On a single individual lot, you typically never have to do a drainage study for an individual lot. For a subdivision, you have to. For an individual lot, it's a minuscule amount that is leaving the lot as a result of one house development. So the other thing I'd want to say, by cutting open the forest a little bit, by opening this up a little bit, it's going to help to dry things out a little bit. I know what she said about the trees and the roots and the other things, and you don't want to get into the wetlands and cut those all up. But some of this other area, I believe it's going to dry things out. That's my experience. Dry up that area a little bit and not make it more wet. Part of the roof, part of the driveway, there'll be a little bit of runoff from that, but the yard and the other things are going to help to absorb, and it should counterbalance it. It usually does. It always does. We never have to do a drainage study on a single lot, is what I'd want to say.
How far is the septic from the neighbor's line?
13 feet to the lot line. How far is the neighbor's septic?
Well, no, how far is this septic that you're looking, because we're talking almost 2 of them here. The second variance is that you're looking for...
I think we should separate that out into the second, just keep them separate.
Well, it's actually, it's
Sure,
almost
I don't
one the same.
mind.
Let me say why. If the concern with the first one here is water table or flooding...
Is your light on?
Yeah. If the concern is the water table or flooding, that is obviously, septic is something to take into consideration as well, right?
Mhm.
Or am I missing something on that?
No.
I realize that we're taking them separately as far as petitions, but I just bring that up just because I was curious as to where the septic, because the way that, when I put it on the map here, it looks like the way, their backyard's here, the house is here, and the septic's there. And that's why I wanted to know where the property line is. I do agree.
Well, when
that
you,
there's-
when you viewed the lot today, if you did go
Yeah.
out to the lot, you should know that a portion of the neighbor's property, the tree line, you can look at the tree line on the plan, at least it's a light gray line. If you would have looked up that tree line, you would have seen significant upland. As a matter of fact, their septic is within that area. So I just want to, there's an encroachment there
Mhm.
eventually, so those lots will be melded together, but, and
What
hopefully a
lots?
buffer and
Oh, okay.
whatnot. I'm just saying from a perspective of things being cut within the property.
Okay.
So what you may have been looking at is on the westerly part of the lot when you went out to the site today. And I say westerly, but I really mean easterly, sorry.
Right.
I've turned around here a little bit. But on the easterly side of the lot, it is wet when you're viewing it from the road. But as you get to the westerly part of the lot, significant dry upland in that area. Certainly sufficient to do what we're proposing.
And the back is significantly wet as well.
Yeah.
There is a wetland in the back, but I do want to point out the wetland in the back is very much a forested wetland. It's not nearly as, it's a forested wetland. It's not significantly wet like you might have seen
Sure
in the
doesn't
front.
look like it on this map.
That's the outskirts of it. There's a larger wetland that this tails into. I'm just saying from a visual standpoint, when you're on the lot, that area is, from many perspective, you wouldn't think it might be a wetland.
Lenny?
Two questions. I'm looking at the disposal system, and I'm interpreting this thing as telling me that you're planning on having a full foundation under this house?
There's not gonna be a base. They're talking about putting this on a slab at this point. So, to reduce cost as a result of Habitat for Humanity's thing. So there will be
So this
less
plan
impact
is
as far as that
irrelevant?
goes. Yes.
It's worthless.
I'm sorry, what is worthless?
What?
I missed
Pardon?
that.
I missed what you were saying. What were you saying, Lenny?
Well, it's just a whole different ballgame. I got my answer.
I just wanted
Okay.
to
I have
be-
a question, Mr. Chairman. Is Conservation Commission looked at this?
I don't imagine.
No, this, I mean, this wouldn't go to planning board if it were to be approved because it's a single-family building lot. So they wouldn't get a chance to comment on it in that case.
Conservation isn't going to get to comment on this either?
No, they would only, if it was a planning board application, they would have the jurisdiction to have comment on it.
No.
But it
We don't
won't
have
be
anything from them, that's why I asked the question.
So this would never go to the planning board?
No.
We'll never go to conservation either, okay.
No.
It's an existing lot of record.
Okay. I think there were some other people who wanted to speak.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
just-
My bad.
Yep, if you could just have a seat. Sir?
How's everybody doing tonight?
It's good.
Great. I live at 19 Maidstone Drive. I actually live across the street from the property. That culvert actually sits on the back side of my property. And as we speak right now, it's full of water. It drains, I mean, obviously, we've gotten a boatload of water, but the water has to go somewhere. It starts between Maidstone, down the back sides of the house, it drops on the back side of my house, and it goes on the other side of Cary. So, by them messing with the water table on that side, I can only see like what those Seltzer Moops are talking about, that it's gonna move all the water back towards my side. Now, I don't think anybody wants any water on their property. I know if I walk in my backyard right now, it's like a giant sponge. Yeah, granted, we've got a boatload of water, but the culvert's there for a reason. They just didn't crack open the street, throw a pipe in it and say, okay, this is how it's gonna drain. There's water there. So somebody needs to go out and take a look at it. Like they said, Habitat for Humanity, that's fine. You know what? I'm a contractor. I build homes. I'm all for it. It's a bad spot for it. I think it's just bad for everybody that lives there. And if it's, the lot's been there for so long, why didn't they do it before? I mean, it's not now all of a sudden, it's okay, like, let's try to put something there. I mean, it is what it is. So I think somebody needs to take a look at the water. You know, I don't want water in my basement. I don't want any of my neighbors want it. So that's all I have to say.
Can you state your name?
Can you state your name again?
I'm sorry, my first name's Eric, last name's Gaska, G-A-S-K-A. I live at 19 Maidstone.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Actually, could you hold on a second? Ms. Pellegrino has a question
Yes.
for you.
In the culvert, is there water there year-round?
No. Last year, I actually bought the house in 13. 14, the year they dug the pit. In 15, it was dry. This year, obviously, we've got a lot of rain. So it's, you know, I know when they dug the pit because I watched them do it. It was dry as dry. We hadn't got any rain. It was, you know, couldn't water our lawns. We couldn't do anything. So, but now there's water there. So, I mean, if it does this again next year and it rains again like this year, then we're going to have a problem.
Is the water moving in the culvert?
No, it doesn't flow like a river, but it does drain. It actually drains from the backside of my house to the other side of Cary, which is actually the Seltzer Woods' property.
So it's draining from your property to this
Yes.
proposed lot?
It actually drives between both the Maidstone is a horseshoe.
Yep.
And the water runs between all the houses between Maidstone Drive. If you drive down Maidstone, there are certain houses that have wetlands, especially as you get towards Patton. There's wetlands everywhere. The wetlands are actually in my backyard. So the water runs down through there and drops into that culvert. And I think it actually goes from the other side of Maidstone Drive. So I'm 19 to like on the other side of like 25 or 26 down in that neck of the woods. There's a lot of water in there, a lot of water.
So
I
you're
know that
saying
there's
that-
houses on the other side. I know the kid that lives across the street from me, he wants to put an addition on his house and they want to get flood insurance. So, I mean, the wetlands are there.
So you're saying putting a slab, not a full foundation, but putting a slab there will move that water?
I don't care what you put there. You put anything, the water's going to go somewhere.
Okay.
And I don't know how a slab's going to work there. But that's not my call.
All right.
Where's your house?
Can I get up and
Yep.
Yes.
No, just point to it.
So
This is the lot we're talking about here.
This is me.
That's your, okay.
And the person that just bought this house, that house went for foreclosure. If he knew what was going on, he'd probably be here. His septic tank runs right on the property line.
Yep.
As it stands, the septic, it's up.
Yep.
So he's at what, 169?
He's on the corner.
177.
He's on this corner here.
Oh, he's
And-
on 177?
Yeah, and his septic, shown on this, is right here.
Yeah, right there.
It's gonna abut right up to where
Against
they
this.
wanna put the septic.
Yep.
I don't like it.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. Good. Ma'am?
That's another question. I was gonna ask that.
I was wondering what this.
You always beat me.
You could just state your name and. All right, guys. Let's go through this.
Too close.
My name's Christina Coviello. I live at 145 Babusick Lake Road. Would be the backyard abutter to this property. I agree with the Seltz and Wilps when they say that Habitat for Humanity and wanting to help out, you know, in that respect, I'm all for that. However, I do also agree that I've lived in this property for 7 years now. And yeah, a long time. Even on our driest years, we have water. So much so that the ducks, it looks like a pond in my yard. No joke. I mean, you can look out my window and there's ducks floating in my lawn. The kids joke about it, but my fear is that, I mean, part of my ignorance, but I do know that when you start cutting down trees and things of that nature, as Julie said, they're part of the natural reason why, they need the water. They absorb some of the water. You start cutting that down and making changes to the area. I can just imagine the water, more of it coming into my yard. And we already have quite a bit. So it's a big concern to my husband and I with the water table being so high there. And the water table surrounding our yard, it goes from the back there, where Eric just mentioned, comes right around my backyard, right down my side yard, and right out to Busick Lake Road. In fact, there's a pond on the other end of my property. So my whole property fills up with water. If it rains even just a small bit, I walk and I need boots because my sneakers soak. And I can have evidence of that, just mine and my kids. We're always wet shoes everywhere, just walking through the yard. So my fear is if this property is touched, more water will drain towards my yard, and I feel like we already have enough. So I'm just concerned about the impact it would have on my yard. And then, of course, the value of the property if we were to sell it, because, if someone looked at it when it's rainy, it's wet already. We knew that, but I think most people don't like that. So it would be a huge concern if there was any further water coming towards us. That would be an impact to us and a concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, sir? Anybody else like to speak? Come on down.
Okay, so
Yep, sign in, state your name, please. Thank
My
you.
name is Edward Shadlovsky. I live at 11 Maidstone Drive, Merrimack. I'm also a veteran, so I understand what they're talking about. I served in the military for 6 years.
Okay, make sure you sign in, please. Thank you. You said you live where?
11 Maidstone Drive.
Okay.
I've lived there for approximately 30 years. I've seen this lot in back of me several times trying to be built on. They one time cleared the land and they mowed down the trees and everything else to clear it, I guess. And there were lady slippers back there, a whole slew of them. It was gorgeous back there when it was left alone, when nobody was playing with the land. When they cleared it, that for one time or another, or in the past, they destroyed all of them. And then I have one pine tree right now is leaning between two other pines that's completely dead. And I've got to figure a way of cutting that down so there's a lot of kids that go back there and play. I'm worried about widowmakers, trees falling on their branches. So that water is really moving out of that area. For the 30 years that I've been there, I've walked out there with boots at times towards the back of the lands, and it is deep at times when we had heavy rains. I agree that during the summertime when we had the drought, the back area was much drier, but it wasn't completely gone. The water was still there. It still existed.
Wait a second, I'm back for a second. So last year, when we had the drought last year, right? Late night. So you were out there last year and there was still water out there?
Yes.
About what, ankle high, shin? I'm just curious, shin high? Or
Probably
just
shin
cushion?
high. Just yeah, about shin high. My concerns is this leaching field. Even though you put a leaching field in or approve or disapprove of putting a leaching field in, the water's got to go someplace. I know how leaching fields work. I have a pump-up system. When I had mine done many years ago, I had an old leaching field system in, and it failed. So I had a new one, and I couldn't build back there because it was rejected. So I had to come up with an alternative plan, which was basically putting a leaching field in my backyard and raising it up and pumping into it. was required to go up like 3 feet or so. So I have this giant mound in my backyard for the leaching field itself. So I could not put a leaching field out towards that wetlands area. My concern is where the water goes. I mean, I know that I have a sump pump in my basement that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I'm always running water out of it. So if that water table goes up, I would agree. There's going to be more water in houses, and you get the black mold effect and everything else. So just a
Sounds
concern.
like a general consensus.
What?
Sounds like a general consensus.
I've been through this. I've seen this property worked on several times, and it's failed. One time it failed a perk test. They came out and did a perk test on the land. They took a soil sample a long time ago, many years ago, and they said it was not doable, it was not buildable. And now it's coming back again. It keeps coming back periodically, every 7 or 10 years, it reappears back on the radar again. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful evening.
Any questions? Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jeff Dittman. I live at 7 Cary Drive. I've lived there for 32 years. I live directly across the street from the Seltz and Wilps, and I live diagonally across the street from this lot. I just want to give you some extra or additional perspective on the water problem. In the 32 years I lived there, actually in the first 4 or 5 years, my basement flooded 4 times, and then my wife said, "You do something about this or we're moving." So I installed an interior drainage system with a sump pump, and as some of the other neighbors have said, their sump pumps run often, and mine is no exception. It runs frequently, particularly in the spring when the snow is melting and when there's the early spring rains. Also, for additional perspective, there's a lot next door to mine, which is it's between my lot and Eric's lot. The person there, he just has a freestanding garage on a slab, and he told there is wetlands on his property, from what I understand. He isn't here tonight, but this is hearsay, but he told me that he was not allowed to build a permanent structure on that land because of the wetlands, so he built a slab and he has a freestanding structure on it.
I'm sorry, where does he live?
He lives between my house and Eric and the corner of Maidstone.
Okay.
So he lives almost directly across the street from this lot.
5B 170 on the plan.
So I guess the points are, number one, I just wanted to give you additional perspective that my house has water issues. I can't believe that this house would not have water issues as well. Number two, as the other neighbors have said, that the water needs to go somewhere, and there's already plenty of it in the neighborhood. And lastly, as Eric said, if this lot was feasible to be built on, why hasn't been built on already? Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much. Anybody else would like to speak against? Excellent. Yep, sure. You may.
Couple comments back.
Yes,
and
please.
then maybe the owner of the lot would like to speak too, if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine.
Thank you very much.
Is he sworn in?
No, not yet.
Did you swear in?
At the beginning.
Raise your right hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Have you speak. Why don't you come on up and have a seat, and then he can make a couple of comments.
Terrific. Thank you.
I'll have you sign in as well.
So regarding the neighbors and the neighborhood, I don't doubt there's obviously heard a plethora of testimony that the water table's high there. People have water in their basements, et cetera, and need to work with that. And from my full experience and knowledge, one little house lot is not going to add even a drop or two beyond its borders. Moreover, the owner does have the right, heard about trees and forests. The owner, any owner that has this from now or in the future, has the right to cut all the trees on the lot. They choose to. And defoliate that and use it for whatever they choose to. It is their land, and they are paying for this as a buildable lot. It probably has not been developed for a whole number of years because it is not a desirable lot. It's a little mosquito bog in the front, you know, and it's just not greatly desirable. It's tight between a couple of wetlands and other things, and not denying that. But I think our request of putting a very small house on a slab, and that can be a condition, and respecting the wetlands permits, we will not violate any wetland ordinance. We will protect the wetlands. I'll make sure that silt fence and other things are put up as part of this construction phase. Grass will help absorb some of this. It's going to be negligible in terms of the neighbor. And if the proposed driveway should be a gravel driveway to help some more permeability, less impervious surface, then that can be a condition. I mean, they're willing to do whatever's necessary. They want to do things as efficient and cost-effective as possible anyway. But the idea is that they want to put a small house on a piece of upland, to be clear, 20 feet to the wetlands at its closest point, and there is an approved septic that is pretty much close to right where the neighbor's septic is already. And that's our point.
Yeah. Any comments you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell a little bit more about history that I know about this lot.
Can you make sure the light's on, please?
It is on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So, looks like this lot wasn't developed because town owned it for I don't know how many years.
Okay.
So I purchased it in 2009 thinking that I might gonna build there. I was young, I had only one kid, and I was really busy, so we didn't do anything until 2014 when we went to the state, got all the soil samples, basically to see what we can do on it. And the Meridian, the company, they basically said you can't build 3-bedroom, and I have 3 kids now. So I wasn't able to build what I wanted for myself. And then one of my friends actually said about Habitat, they do these great things, and that's how I connected with Habitat. I've been on a property probably 30 times since I own it, since 2009. There is a wet area on, that's the east?
Yeah. Yeah, it is the east.
That's the east. I've never seen flowing water in that area. If you walk into it, it is wet. And specifically when I talked to Habitat, I wanted to be very honest. We went last year out. We started this process a little bit, about a year ago, right after the floods in the spring, so they can see the lot, so if they will be interested to build something there.
Have they been there
Yeah.
this year? Like within the last 3 months?
Yeah.
I assume, yeah.
Assume or you know?
No.
I haven't been involved
Okay.
so much myself
I know,
personally.
yes.
They took over it. So we went last year there, and there was no any standing water in any of these wetland areas, unless you talk about the culvert, which is in the very corner here.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, there's an empty lot here, and that is a little bit more wet over there. In here, there's no house on this lot. So I personally haven't seen any standing water there when I've been in all those times, and I've been there more often since 2014. Before that, I really wasn't there too many times.
Okay.
Since 2014. And
Trees.
oh, the trees. Somebody just said that that lot has been leveled. There's 100-year pines on there. I don't think that lot has ever been touched from what I can see.
I would agree.
I can't comment on whether that.
I mean, there may have been something,
The last
Scott, but
30
it's never
years,
been-
somebody went in there and cut some trees down. I don't know that for a fact.
Right,
you know.
but there are trees, I mean, this thick pines.
Okay.
So I don't think that lot has ever been developed.
Okay.
Or even tried to be developed.
Okay.
That's it.
Any other question? Any questions for
Oh, just one
Yes, sir.
comment.
Yes, sir.
When we talk about septic, this system was approved specifically for newer type self-cleaning septic system that does not need regular leach field. And that was the state rule about this lot. They said we will approve this septic with this new type of system that has I'm not the septic guy, but basically by the time it goes through all the chambers, it lets the clean water out.
We're actually going to address the septic separate
All right.
from this, but thank you very much for the details and clarification of that. Any questions on the house, not the septic? Rich? Anybody else like to speak in favor or against? Tony, anything before I close the public hearing?
Nope.
Okay, closing the public hearing. Comments, questions from the board, please? Or comments and discussion from the board? Regarding the single-family dwelling, not the septic.
So I guess my question to Joe, is there anything that we can add to this to address wetland issues?
The wetland issue at hand would be the setback. So they're asking for 20 feet, whereas the ordinance requires 40 feet. So
I'm
that's-
sorry, yes, that's what the variance is for. I'm talking
Right.
about like runoff and.
Drainage-wise, that's something that unfortunately wasn't addressed at the time that this subdivision was put in place in the 1960s. It would be something that would be looked at today if a subdivision were proposed. We haven't found anything on the plans that notes any stipulations or requirements for drainage in this subdivision from that time.
So there's nothing on our end that we can do to accommodate that?
Not with an existing lot of record. That has nothing on the subdivision plan that we could enforce.
Okay, thank you.
In light of the testimony from the folks living there for various years, I only find number 4, diminished surrounding properties not be diminished value. I mean, that might seem to be an area that obviously there's some concern regarding drainage and standing water and the culvert and all of that. Any other comments or discussions? Lynn, Lenny, Tony?
I don't see that they've met the unnecessary hardship. It appears that their reasoning for hardship is because this was a buildable lot back in 1967. The soil science and wetland protections and everything else that have been developed and designed since that time, it may have been buildable back then, but nobody wanted to build on it. And if this were coming before a board now for subdivision, I can't imagine that we would approve this as a buildable lot. So having that as a hardship, I don't believe that has been met.
So do you think that we should go into B, because we did not address that we did not address B during the initial presentation. Do we want to go into that?
If you like.
Would that make sense for everyone, or? Because I only ask because it says if the criteria for unnecessary hardship is not deemed to exist, we would technically need to go into that, and we didn't because I had stated that I felt that it was met.
I mean, yeah, okay, so the whole thing reads, when it would deem to exist if owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and variance is therefore necessary to enable a reasonable use of the property. That being said, although that wasn't, you're right, that wasn't discussed during the initial presentation, and I believe it has been discussed through public hearing, talk in regards to drainage, the wetlands, and the water. And correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, I don't know if I can reopen public to discuss that, but I think that actually was addressed in the public based upon people's concerns of the drainage and water and the culvert and all of that. If I'm wrong, I'd be more than happy to open it back up to the group there, but I think that, yeah, we kind of addressed that.
I just think this is a way too tight use on this, but that you're encroaching on 2 setbacks, One is the septic and one is the wetlands, and it's just too tight a use on this property based on what we do now on buildable lots.
My only real concern is that, given the nature of this property, this is the end of the line, which means if we approve it, there's no checks and balances to check for drainage and runoff, and that kind of puts us in an odd position.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to deny Timothy Peliquin LLS petitioner and Eric Jerkins owner variance under section 2.02.76 of the zoning ordinance to permit the construction of a single-family dwelling 20 feet from a wetland, whereas 40 feet is required. The parcel is located at 12 Cary Drive in the R1 Residential and Aquifer District, or Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 5B, lot 176, case 2017-15, and I will be citing that number 4, the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. I don't think there's any way to prove that.
Lynn, did you want to add to that?
And I would add that did not justify the unnecessary hardship.
Are you seconding the motion?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor of denial of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? 5-0. Gentlemen, thank you.
Sorry, guys.
We'll obviously withdraw our second
I'm just
at this time.
Just about to read that in. Jillian, I need to read in withdrawals, right?
Please do, for the record.
At the request of the petitioner, Timothy A. Peliquin, LLS, petitioner, and Eric Jones, owner, variance under section 3.02.4 of the zoning ordinance to permit the construction of a new septic system 13 feet from the side property line, whereas 20 feet is required. The parcel is located at 12 Cary Drive in R1 Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 5B, lot 176, case number 2017-14. The petitioner has requested to withdraw their petition. Sorry. Thank you. All right. You need a timeout?
55.
With all due respect to the folks from my box, I realize you've been here very long. Could you just give us 5 minutes? Thank you. 5-minute break,
Otherwise,
folks.
it's going to get very unpleasant back.
We're hearing petition 8 first. Variance 8. So, My Box New England LLC petitioner and TW Bridge Associates LLC owner variance under section 3.02 note 6 of the zoning ordinance to permit the construction of a 39,100 square foot 20 square foot warehouse 20 feet from the Daniel Webster Highway right of way, whereas 50 feet is required. The parcel is located at 101 Herrick Street in the C2 General Commercial and I1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 3D-2, lot 020, case number 2017-17. Before you start, are you okay with the fact Lenny will be back? But there he is. Okay, never mind.
Patrick, just a small correction. It's 25 feet rather than 20 feet.
Did I say 20? I'm sorry, 25 feet. I apologize. Correction on that, 25. Thank you. Gentlemen,
sure,
if you please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Chad Brannon. I'm a civil engineer with Fieldstone Land Consultants. With me tonight is Rico Barrasso with My Box New England LLC. We're before you this evening seeking a variance and special exception to develop tax map parcel 3D-2-20 located at 101 Herrick Street into My Box New England's New England headquarters. The subject property consists of approximately 2.48 acres of land and is located at the intersection of Daniel Webster Highway and Herrick Street.
Go ahead.
The property lies within the general commercial, industrial, and aquifer conservation overlay districts. The property is bordered by commercial and industrial properties all around, with the closest neighbors being Citizens Bank, Merrimack Building Supply, and Risen and Landscaping to the west, and Fallon's Furniture to the south. The subject property, it's my understanding that the subject property has been on the market for the better part of the last 20 years, and we suspect that is primarily due to the existing conditions of the site. The topography on site is relatively steep off from Herrick Street, as well as Daniel Webster Highway, with nearly 30 feet of elevation from Daniel Webster Highway back to the eastern boundary of the property. The property is also severely burdened by existing stormwater flow from the Daniel Webster Highway, which discharges onto the site in 2 locations. The northern most location, which is situated in this area here, ultimately runs to the east and through the property in that fashion.
That's a wetland you're
This,
putting, Brian?
well, this is the wetlands currently, but when this culvert was initially installed, this was all upland area. What's happened, and I don't know if any of the board members have had an opportunity to visit the site consists of very sandy soils. And the runoff out of that culvert has scoured those soils upwards of 4 to 6 feet in areas and basically disposed of that sediment down into this wetland area in here. So this is all the wetland through the site, and because it's been scoured so much, essentially down to the seasonal high water table, if not deeper in spots, it does have jurisdictional wetland characteristics, but it's a result of the drainage from the Daniel Webster Highway. Because it has jurisdictional wetland characteristics, we are before this board seeking a special exception to impact those wetlands. But it is important to understand how those existed through the site over time.
So it's not a natural wetlands, it's a wetlands due to drainage.
Right, and I think those are represented quite clearly in the photos that were part of the package. You can see the severe scouring and actually the root structure of the trees, you know, extending out into that ditch or scour, if you will.
Chad, you said there was a culvert
That's correct. There's a culvert right here.
under?
That comes across and under Daniel Webster Highway. It captures a good amount of runoff from Daniel Webster Highway
Okay.
and also up on the hill.
Okay.
There's also another culvert that comes under Daniel Webster Highway and discharges on the site in this location here. It doesn't have as much contributing flow, so it hasn't, you know, chewed away at the sandy soils on site.
So if you're going to build in there, you're going to have to, what, backfill that with, I mean, or is the drainage going to take care of the runoff? I'm assuming the drainage is going to take care of the runoff altogether.
We have an excellent proposal for the project, which I am gladly going to go through and explain the drainage components and what we plan on doing to address, which is really an existing condition, you know, that remedy an existing condition on site. So my client has a very unique business that requires a fairly large building. The building that is being proposed for this project is about 35 feet in height. It has 3 floors. You can see down here, this is an elevation view. I'd be happy to put it up on the board just to discuss it.
We have that right here.
Okay. So it's 3 floors through the majority of the building, 35 feet in height, and then there's 4 floors for this glass tower, which is located in the most northern corner of the building. So when you're looking at the site from Daniel Webster Highway, because of the topography on site, the design is such that what you're going to be looking at is a single story from Daniel Webster Highway. So this is the west elevation, which is from Daniel Webster Highway here. And you can see it's going to be a single story building.
All right.
I'm sorry.
No, I thought everyone.
I had no idea there was something down there.
Oh, I was going to put it on the board, but it
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
it
no,
was in
yeah,
the
you can
packet.
put it up on the board. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Let's get late. I apologize, Chad.
So again, from Daniel Webster Highway, you would be looking at a single-story building. Essentially, what we're proposing to do is to situate the building forward on the lot into the slope, which is the reason for our variance request, you know, to 25 feet where 50 is required. What that additional 25 feet allows us to do, if you can imagine the existing slope right now carries through the site like this. By pushing the building 25 feet closer to Daniel Webster Highway, we can take this amount of fill, or the cut, if you will, from the building, and put it up against the building and create a nice front yard appearance, be level with the road, so that you don't have a building at the bottom of the slope with, the state highway drainage coming down. It creates, what that does is it creates a void for trash and is not going to create an appearance that my client's interested in, on this site or for their New England headquarters.
Quick question. Is this building replacing the current, because if I remember correctly, My Box has another location on Continental, and if I also remember, we approved and they did a major amount of construction to the front of the building. Is this
College Bound Movers?
It was 3 uses: college-bound movers, climate control, self-storage, and the My Box. And to answer your question,
I've seen a couple of the My Boxes
Yeah.
in the yard there. So is this replacing that, or is this in addition?
It's replacing that. They would be relocated. This would be their main New England headquarters.
So you'd be leaving that whole facility that you
That
just put
use, the My Box use would leave that facility, but
There are minor uses on that facility.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's just nice advertising.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry. Continue.
So just, kind of want to touch on the building component. So what you have here is, this is where you're down into the site, where it would be 35 feet in elevation, again, along Daniel Webster Highway, single story with the exception of this, kind of the entrance of the site, which is a glass facade. This would be the rear view of the building, so nothing that you would see. It essentially faces the jurisdictional wetlands, or the east boundary of the property. And then this is your north elevation. So this is the elevation that'll face Herrick Street. But if you can imagine, Herrick Street is really high up as well, so you're not going to be seeing that elevation. You'd probably see the top portion, windows, and the glass, the upper level of the glass facade from Herrick Street. I mean, if you look down the slope, then you would see the whole building. But if somebody driving by on Daniel Webster Highway is only going to see the upper portion. So we think what that does is it really helps hide such a large building to service a growing business on a site that really has some pretty significant constraints.
Where are you exiting and entering? Is it Daniel Webster or Herrick Street? Herrick.
It's Herrick, sorry.
Herrick. And then, at least, I'm looking at the proposal here. Parking?
Right, so it's a pretty unique use, where it's a My Box self-storage facility. So you don't have a lot of people that would typically visit the site.
I'm thinking of more employees, but.
Right, so we have 28 parking spaces proposed in this location here, and then 6 parking spaces proposed here. Again, access does come off of Herrick Street here. With the access in this location, what it allows us to do is to have a longer run into the site, so we're able to drop that elevation in a responsible manner, get down to that base floor elevation, and fit everything within the topography of the site, which is really important.
I have a question about that, though. So by putting the building there, it's going to move the water flow further back, and then you're going to move that onto a parking lot?
No, so I can get into those details. So what we're proposing with the existing drainage patterns is to install drainage manholes on the ends of the pipes and essentially run a pipe through the site. And we would design an outlet at the end of the culvert, which would be like a plunge pool, which is an energy dissipating design. So it's going to take all of that water, put it into a plunge pool, which a lot of times I don't know if you're familiar with Gabion baskets, but it's wire baskets that are filled with stone. And you put the stone in the basket so that the flow doesn't move the aggregate. And what that does is it dissipates the energy of the stormwater flow and then allows it to discharge into the downstream wetlands in a responsible manner.
So where is it going to go after, if it's not there?
It's going to discharge, it's going to go in the same place. This is the jurisdictional wetland comes here and then goes this way.
Okay.
So it's right here.
And what's behind the property?
There's a condo development on this property, but there's nothing in close proximity to the site. I mean, that's a pretty substantial jurisdictional wetland right here. So we're not changing the drainage patterns. We're capturing a discharge that is, not stabilized at all. It's actively eroding over time and will continue to do so. We're collecting that. We're going to engineer an outlet, which would be reviewed through the planning process, so that the existing flows will discharge off the site in a responsible manner. No erosion and sedimentation will occur after the project. The drainage for the site, I mean, you're looking at a 39,100 square foot building, and then improvements for access is going to be completed under a chamber system that's going to go under the parking lot in this location here. So we'd capture all the runoff from the proposed improvements, relay it into this chamber system. Because there is a fill on that downhill side, we'll be able to infiltrate some of the runoff, and then we'd responsibly meter the flow out of that chamber system so that the post or after construction runoff would match the existing conditions during the peak rates, which is what we're required to do in order to satisfy the local regulations. So we understand that process. We look forward to hopefully getting to that point before the planning board.
All right, why don't we go through the 5 points?
Sure.
And go from there.
So section 3.02 of the zoning ordinance outlines the dimensional requirements in the general commercial zone, C2. More specifically, this section requires a front setback of 50 feet along US Route 3. Since the proposed construction is going to take place within the 50 feet, we're proposing 25 feet for a setback. A variance is required. Looking at the questions under the variance criteria, number 1, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest because granting this a variance would allow for the productive use of the existing property. The subject property has been on the market for the better part of the last 20 years and presumably has not been sold due to the topography of the site and the existing drainage patterns on site from the adjacent highway runoff. The proposed use is very unique and we believe is a good fit for the subject property, as the proposed development will not need direct access from US Route 3, can fit with the existing topography as proposed, and can work with the existing drainage from the state highway system. Zoning ordinances are generally written to manage the development in towns and allow for responsible and reasonable development and expansion. Considering the proposed development will enhance the visual appearance from the street, will allow for the productive development of a lot in the general commercial district, and will be consistent with the surrounding properties, we believe that this proposal is reasonable. It is our opinion that this project will substantially improve the aesthetics of the subject parcel and the surroundings. This will be a substantial investment in an area of town that is reserved for this type of use. This investment will add value to the tax base with very little burden on any services in return. Due to these reasons and the fact that this proposal will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, or general welfare of the public, we believe that this proposal would not be contrary to the public interest.
Any questions? Number 2?
Number 2, granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance because this proposal is consistent with the surroundings and will allow for the productive use of the property. When we evaluated the surrounding properties, we found 6 properties that have been developed along this stretch of US Route 3 within 50 feet. With the existing setback to the existing buildings ranging from 17 to 33 feet from the right-of-way, and some of these developments even had parking or driveways within this area, further reducing the setback to any improved portion of the property. When we look at these properties and compare it to our proposal, where we will have a 43-foot landscaped front lawn area adjacent to a brand-new single-story building, and when I say single-story, again, that's just what you'll see from Daniel Webster Highway with the exception of the glass facade.
43 or 25? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused here.
Well, it's 43 feet, meaning from the edge of the existing road, Daniel Webster Highway, to our building. So there'll be a 43-foot vegetated area, but it's a 25-foot setback from the right-of-way to the building. Do you understand what I'm saying?
The right-of-way is further in.
So this is the right-of-way right here. This heavy line, sorry for my shake.
So the right-of-way is in about
Right.
20 feet.
Oh.
And this
Right.
is the pavement here.
Good
So what
morning.
I'm-
Yeah, no, I.
Good morning.
I'm so sorry. It's,
It's okay.
it just clicked. I'm
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
So we believe that this proposal will fit very nicely in this location. Just as an example, the Citizens Bank across the road is 26 feet from the building to the right-of-way. It's
Okay.
actually less than that because they have a drive-through lane to any proposed site improvement. There's also a handful of lots, or 3 lots, just off the page. Actually, have them on this plan here. There's 3 lots to the south of our site that have, buildings well within, the 50-foot setback. And then there's also a couple properties, only one shown on this plan, to the north that have the buildings within the 50-foot setback. And these are all very similar, meaning they're, within, 30 to 25 feet, some of them even down to 17. So we think the neighborhood, this wouldn't be the only building within 25 feet of Daniel Webster Highway. But what we think is important is there's that 43 feet of vegetation that we're proposing to have between our building, and it'll be landscaped very nicely. Didn't mean to get off track there.
That's okay.
Going on with number 2, we believe that the intent of this ordinance is to provide adequate separation and buffering to enhance the visual appearance from the adjacent street. Since this development will, in our opinion, enhance the visual appearance from the street and will be consistent with what currently exists in the neighborhood, we believe there should be some consideration given to the setback requirement. The proposed use is permitted in the zoning district, and the development is consistent with the existing development in this area in town. The site plan demonstrates that there is adequate space on the subject properties to support this development. Due to the above reasons, or the reasons stated, and the fact that this proposal will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, or general welfare of the public, we believe that this proposal would observe the spirit of the ordinance. Excuse me.
Easy for you to say.
Any questions?
No.
Number 3.
Number 3, granting the variance would do substantial justice because granting this variance would allow a local business to grow and address an increasing demand. The applicant is looking to grow in this location as it is desirable, considering the parcel's proximity to the highway. We believe this proposal will result in no negative impacts to the neighborhood, as the site will be designed to meet and exceed all local regulations and will address drainage deficiencies that currently exist on site due to the local highway system. This project will have no negative impacts on local services, will increase the tax base for the town. Granting this variance would do substantial justice because it would allow for the productive use of the property as described while providing reasonable and responsible growth in the community.
Questions? Number 4.
Number 4, granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties because this proposal will consist of developing the subject property with a use that is permitted in the general commercial zone. This use will be compatible with the surrounding uses and will enhance the area. In our opinion, this proposal would improve the property and associated values in local tax base, which ultimately means it will have a positive impact on the community. It has also been our experience that new construction and development will oftentimes actually increase the value of surrounding property values. For all of these reasons, we would expect this project to have positive impacts on the surrounding property values as it will rejuvenate the site and the surroundings.
Questions? Necessary hardship?
Unnecessary hardship. Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because, number 1, No fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property because Section 3.02 of the Merrimack zoning ordinance requires that a 50-foot front yard setback be provided. We believe that the intent of this ordinance is to provide adequate separation and buffering to enhance the visual appearance from the adjacent street. The site has been designed with the proposed building 25 feet from US Route 3 right-of-way to address the special conditions of the property. These special conditions consist of the 28 feet in elevation drop from the adjacent highway system, as well as the existing drainage from the highway system. Due to these two conditions, the building has been designed and positioned to allow for reasonable development of the property. The building has been situated into the slope and has been designed to allow for an improvement to the grading along US Route 3. The aesthetics from Route 3 will consist of a one-story building, with the exception of the glass tower or the facade, with roughly 43 feet of front yard area, which will include significant landscaping. Internally, the building will be 3 stories in height to accommodate the grade change and provide for adequate indoor storage for the MyBox facility. We do not believe that this development will have a negative impact on the general public. For these reasons, we do not believe that a fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. A denial of this variance would result in unnecessary hardship, as it would not allow for the productive use of the property. The property, again, has been on the market for a long time, but it has not been sold due to the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. The proposed use is a good fit with the property's special conditions, which is why we are requesting that the board grant this variance.
And number 2.
Number 2, the proposed use is a reasonable one because, well, primarily for all of the reasons previously stated, we believe that this proposal meets the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The proposed development will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, or general welfare of the public. It is our opinion that this project will rejuvenate an existing parcel in town, which we believe will substantially improve the aesthetics of the subject parcel and the surroundings. The use proposed for this property is permitted in the underlying zone and will be consistent with the surroundings. The site plan demonstrates, again, that there is adequate space on the subject property to support this development. Since this proposal will improve the neighborhood, be consistent with the surroundings, and result in no negative impacts to the public, we believe that this proposal is reasonable.
Everybody feel that on the search was okay? Excellent. What?
Sure.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Okay.
I like it.
I'll open this up to the public. Is there anybody who'd like to speak in favor of this? Anybody who'd like to speak against? Close the public. Wow, that was the first petition we haven't had. Close the public hearing. Do I have discussion, motion?
Motion to grant MyBox New England LLC petitioner and TW Bridge Associates LLC owner variance under section 3.02, note 6 of the zoning ordinance to permit the construction of a 39,100 square foot warehouse 25 feet from the DW right-of-way, whereas 50 feet is required. Parcel is located at 101 Herrick Street in the C2 General Commercial and I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. Tax map 3D-2, lot 020, case 2017-17, with staff recommendations that site
in the
approval
middle.
should be, or site plan approval to be obtained by the planning board.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So it's 5-0-0. Tony the second. Next one. So, on to number 2. MyBox New England LLC petitioner TW Bridge Associates LLC special exception under section 2.02.7A4 of the zoning ordinance to permit impacts to a jurisdictional wetland, allowing for the development of the site. The parcel is located at 101 Herrick Street in the C2 General Commercial and I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 3D-2, lot 020, case number 2017-16. Kind of already discussed the jurisdictional with that. If we just want to go into, is it the
Four items.
The 4 items? That'd be great.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
I lost myself.
So these 4 items are outlined in section 2.0272 of the zoning ordinance. The first one is letter A, to prevent the development of structures and other land uses on or adjacent to wetlands that would contribute to pollution of surface and groundwater. The proposed use will not conflict with this purpose because the proposed development of the property will employ all appropriate stormwater management and erosion control methods in its design. The wetlands that are proposed to be impacted are the result of an unmanaged culvert outfall on a steep slope with soil susceptible to erosion, as they are fine sandy material. The discharge from the culvert outfall continues to erode soil along the cut bank and slope and depositing sediment within the downslope forested wetland areas. The proposed development will infiltrate stormwater runoff through the soil through underground infiltration chambers and will eliminate soil erosion from the culvert discharge by extending the culvert and designing the outfall to have an engineered design such as the plunge pool that I discussed earlier. That again would ensure that the runoff will be managed in an adequate manner and discharged to the downstream jurisdictional wetland without further erosion.
Any questions on that? No. Okay. B.
B, to prevent the destruction and degradation of natural wetlands that provide flood protection. The proposed use will not conflict with this purpose because the wetlands being impacted are substantially created by stormwater discharge from, again, the drainage system from the Daniel Webster Highway, which transitions into a wetland area along the eastern boundary, which is from a groundwater seep at the toe of the slope. The impacted wetlands appear to be artificially created, again, by the road drainage culverts, are not within the 100-year floodplain and drain into an adjacent forested wetland east of the subject property. The proposed use will not conflict with this purpose since the extended culverts will prevent additional erosion and sedimentation from entering the adjacent wetlands, and the engineered outlets at the culvert outfalls will serve to dissipate water energy and allow for proper discharge to downstream areas. I would also state that the wetlands on site are not flood storage wetlands, primarily because of the slope across the project.
Questions? Okay. C.
C, to prevent unnecessary or excessive expenses to the town, to provide and maintain essential service and utilities which arise because of inharmonious use of wetlands in adjacent upland areas. The proposed use will not conflict with this purpose because the proposed use will rectify an existing significant erosion problem from the road drainage culverts. The erosion is not only detrimental to the environment by depositing sediment into the adjacent wetland area, but also could be considered creating a safety issue with the steep, unstable banks, or the scours, as I've explained, that range in 4 to 6 feet deep through the hillside. The proposed use will provide for properly engineered stormwater basins and similar structures to dissipate energy and trap suspended sediment prior to discharging and infiltrating on site. So we don't believe this project is going to create any unnecessary expenses for the town, as there's really going to be no burden for maintenance or management by the town as a result of this project.
Questions? Take us home, Chad.
D, to encourage those uses that can be appropriately and safely located in and around wetland areas. The proposed use will not conflict with this purpose because, again, the proposed use will remove an existing unsafe and unstable, environmentally detrimental situation of an eroded bank. The wetlands being impacted are primarily artificially created and only provide minimal functions and values for stormwater treatment and infiltration. The proposed development is an appropriate, low-impact use that will be, and the design will mitigate any proposed improvements to the site. So there'll be no negative impacts to the downstream wetlands or abutting properties. And therefore, this project can be safely located adjacent to the existing forested wetland area.
Questions? All right. All right. So I'll open the public hearing. Does anybody like to speak in favor? Anybody like to speak against? Sure you don't want to say anything? All right. Close the public hearing. I gotta say that as I was looking at your plans, this reminds me a lot of the Bluebird storage area they just built in Bedford. It's kind of built in, so and that's really aesthetically is really a nice looking building. So, do I have any discussion or motion? Mike.
It was on. I move we grant the special exception requested under section 2.02.7A4 of the zoning ordinance to permit impacts to a jurisdictional wetland allowing for the development of the site. The parcel is located at 101 Herrick Street in the C2 General Commercial and the I1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. Tax map 3D-2, lot 20.
Second.
For you, second that there are staff recommendations?
Subject to staff recommendations included in the memo.
Second.
Now you can second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? 5-0. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience this evening. Good luck. Looks like a beautiful building.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for making the last one an easy one.
Yes. I would have started with that if I knew I was going to go there. All right. Does anybody else want to sit and discuss something for the next half hour? I mean, we're almost. All right.
I move we approve the draft minutes as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Tone and, okay, so that's 4 in favor, one abstention. Tony.
The Magnificent.
The Magnificent.
I wasn't here, but
Tony?
I watched it on TV.
Motion to adjourn.
Nah.
Passed, adjourned.